Please rise for the allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, can we get a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Ms. Dayton? Oh. Let's get a second and then we're gonna, is there a second? Ms. Stone? Ms. O'Neill?
I'd like to make a motion to remove the racial balance plan update from the written report into the discussion.
Is there a second? Ms. Raven, any discussion on that? All those in favor? 7-0. All right, so now we're back to our motion as amended. Any further discussion? All right, so the motion on the table is to approve the meeting agenda as amended. All those in favor? 7-0, thank you. And what we're going to do is we'll put that in before the Board of Ed goals. I think that's the new deed. All right, so now we'll move on to our discussion item. The first item is the strategic plan update. Mr. Mayo.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Thank you, Mr. Bernstein. Oh, look at that echo. I should start singing. It might sound better. Anyway, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for coming out to this retreat. I know it's a hairy night out there. Lots of things going on outside, but we're all in here. And the other thing I'd like to say is I like this format with us all sitting around the table together, all taking a nice lead and a nice, in a leadership capacity, looking forward to moving forward our processes and helping students achieve their highest potential together as a group. So this is a nice way to do it. All of us around the table. So I'm really, really excited about this. As you can tell, I can hardly speak. Anyway, the strategic plan update was completed by a number of people at this table, and we're all going to jump in at one point. I just wanted to say, from my perspective, as a former building leader and now as a leader of the superintendent of this school district, that I really liked the way our students are self-assessing and self-reflecting upon their work now. They're using the data that their students, that their teachers are sharing with them. They're creating goals for themselves. They're reaching those goals and creating new goals for themselves. I really think that's one of the most positive things I've seen in a school district, in our school district in the last 42 years. Give a lot of credit for the strategic plan and the development of it to the previous board, previous superintendent, and the cabinet members that have worked on it. So it's really a great document, and we're going to go a long way with this document in terms of increasing student achievement where we want it to be. Irene? Yeah? Anybody?
You just
Yes.
You should, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So to reiterate what Superintendent Mayo has shared with you, our theme has been around cultivating meaningful partnerships. So we're cultivating a meaningful partnership here. And in partnership, we are trying to achieve our mission that we set out. And our mission is to achieve those goals, the academic, personal, and interpersonal goals that have been written into the strategic plan. And all of that is in service of our vision of the graduate. And from where I sit as your chief academic officer with my team and all of us, I think the vision of the graduate really gained some significant momentum this year, where all things that we were doing was in service of that vision, and as well as the capacities. And we were really trying to change those learner experiences to develop these capacities. And it was really linked to the academic standards in the curriculum. So I know we were seeing a significant change in practice at the classroom level. And I think this is important to know because it's all well and good to be on paper or on the website or in our brochure, but we are really lifting it off of print and we're living it and seeing it happen in the classroom. I don't want to do all the talking.
So I'll just add to what Irene has said and what Ralph said. It truly is occurring in each classroom. I was in classrooms today at North Miamis, and it was pretty warm, 91 degrees in one class, 90 in another. We got some fans so we could cool it down. But the kids were doing their work, they were engaged, they were excited about the work that they were doing. They didn't really notice the heat, it was really as adults. They were working collaboratively together, they were asking very great questions of one another. Well, how did you get to that answer? I wanted to do it this way. Would it work this way? And then having them talk together and say, well, let's give that a try. Now, that wasn't happening 2 years ago. That's happening now. And in every class that I went to today, there was some kind of student engagement, questioning, taking ownership for their own learning. And it wasn't kids sitting in chairs the way it used to be. It really is making a big difference. So I hope that you have opportunities to get to the schools and in the classrooms, and you'll see what we're talking about.
So this is just,
Yeah, we can take questions. Yes,
I was wondering when we would get data on K-12, the reading.
I would guess that in the achievement report, we would have some updates there. This is the strategic plan update. There's no data tables other than the metrics that are in the strategic plan in the dashboard.
Ms. Reagan.
I don't know what page I'm on, but it's the metrics, and I think we've talked about this before. Are we at a place where some of the things that we're measuring, like student satisfaction and staff satisfaction, we still don't have goals? Can we try to establish some goals now that we're in like third year of the strategic plan?
We worked last year in developing some questions from our Panorama survey for the students, for student satisfaction. And we're working, also we've decided on 2 questions, Kim, for our FACE goal so that we could see what the satisfaction was for the parents. So we're going to use those same questions again this year. So that way it will give us an opportunity to see how we're doing.
Sorry, Peter. But like right now, 61%, so we've measured something because there's in percentage of students satisfied, 61. So we know enough about what the current is. I'm still struggling as to why we can't set a target. Like, do we want 100% satisfaction? Do we want 80% satisfaction? Same thing with the staff. Do we want 100% staff satisfied? Is it unrealistic? Do we want 90? Because you have the data on what it is, we just don't know what our target is.
So that percentage was taken from the Panorama survey that we did, and it was our outcome based nationally. Correct, Jen? That was the national, with our information nationally?
No, I was going to say that one way we could frame the goal would be versus a national benchmark. In some of the areas, we are actually significantly higher than the national average, so it would be, I understand that the 61% is that good or is that bad, without the context. But that's specifically why we chose the Panorama, was because it gave us the national framework.
So I guess it would be up to you to determine what kind of a goal you would want for that. I think 100% would be great, but I don't think we would ever make
It has
it.
to be realistic, so is that something we should be doing across retreat right now?
Yeah, we can certainly talk about it now, if it makes sense. So I'm going to state.
I spent a lot of time thinking about the chart that Lauren brought to the discussion, and I'd like to go through it methodically. I have feedback that I think is important. I'll just respond to some of the comments that Lauren has made. I think on the student satisfaction item and the staff satisfaction item, you want to administer an instrument first Then you want to determine where are the norms, compare Greenwich to other districts, and then set the goal. It makes more sense to see first where we are before we set a goal. So I think you've done the right thing in terms of the sequential events that have taken place in the district. But I would echo Lauren in wanting to get that goal settled ASAP. So I'm saying you've followed a good procedure to get us to the goal by first administering the instrument. Peter, do you want to go through feedback on other items here? Or do you want to stick to one topic at a time?
Well, maybe we can take each area or each box at a time, just so we can close them out. So I don't know if anybody else has anything on student satisfaction, staff satisfaction, and I guess family engagement is coming. Is that bad? Dr. Francis.
The only question I was going to ask is, do we have any of those national numbers, any other norms, anything
We
at this
do.
point? I mean, like tonight?
I was not prepared.
Okay, that's fine, I just was
to
wondering,
discuss
yeah.
it.
So I think that's something that we will want, I would certainly want to have something as a comparison point. Even if we're well above, it doesn't mean we don't reach for higher, but I still think it's useful to have other, districts, are there similar districts, national norms, other ways for us to kind of look at these numbers in perspective.
Ms. Stone.
I mean, I think we can start to discuss this and give some input, yes, on what we think a target might be. And, I mean, just as a general beginning, if I could address the question, because student satisfaction seems like a nice place to start. This is a measure of I'm satisfied with my coursework, or I'm satisfied, like I'm happy, or can you just give me a sense for what this exactly means, and then I can extrapolate from there?
If I had the questions in front of me, I'd be able to tell you, but I don't have them.
Can I make a suggestion? I think that I had always imagined that since we were doing an achievement report that focused on specifically the academic tiles, I felt that the board had not been informed about our progress on the remaining tiles in terms of, to exactly your point, we do need to establish some type of benchmark. And I could imagine having another conversation specifically to review the panorama instrument and what it actually means. There are several nuances to how we can interpret the data and how you would like to compare ourselves. There's a national benchmark, do we want to compare ourselves against suburban schools only? Do we only want to compare ourselves against suburban schools with low percentages of low-income children? Do we want to do, so there's a number of different ways that we can, I can certainly make a recommendation, but I think that this is something that the board should discuss. And I'd be happy to do that separately, but to give you the detail that you're looking for.
Ms. Dean.
Are we ready to move to the family engagement item? Okay, so here I feel very differently from my earlier feedback on first administering an instrument, determining the norms, and then setting the goal. I think the board and the staff together can say, we believe X number of interactions in a year should occur between parents, students, and teachers. And secondly, we can say, parents knowing the mastery level that their child has reached is a criteria. And finally, using those individual learner profiles as the mechanism to hold meaningful conferences between parents and teachers. So this one I feel differently about. It's really, in my mind, and others can disagree, it's the number and quality of interactions, not the survey that matters here.
All right, anything else on that box or any other box for that? And Jen, if I heard you right, I guess as part of the achievement report, we'll be talking about the top bar. Is that right?
Yes, I was going to provide you with a little bit more detail on 13 tiles, but focus on the academic both the success metrics and the subject.
Ms. Stowe?
If we're sticking on the academic metrics, can I just ask one question on the AP exams? Do we break it out between 3 and then 4 and 5? Because my kids aren't in high school, but I understand that 4 and 5 is what gives you college credit now, and 3 sometimes doesn't. So do we break that out a little bit differently?
I think what she's asking is that there more detail behind it so we can see out of that 91% where it falls between the 3, 4, and 5.
We do. Yeah, we will be going into
Okay.
Ms. Dayton?
Are we ready to move to community service? Is that okay? So I feel that the board and staff working together can easily solve this one. This is simple in my mind. It's coming up with a number of hours. I don't think we need elaborate preparation strategies to come up with that, and I think we should do it ASAP. In my research, I determined that the state believes 50 hours of service is worth 1/2 credit. So that should be a starting point for Greenwich to determine what is an appropriate goal.
Sorry.
But the challenge there was how do we determine that for the elementary and middle school students, community service? It's easy enough to do it at the high school, but I think, wasn't that the challenge we've been facing with this particular, target?
Yeah, and how to capture it.
Go ahead, Jen.
Jen, why don't you come up to the table?
That's why there's an extra chair.
No. Good, excellent. We have in fact administered a survey from 6 to 12, collecting both their extracurricular and their volunteer hours, which is CNPLP. The volunteer hour goal was set at 10 hours, so what I did was I took each child's self-reported number of community service hours, and you can see on an individual PLP where that student is for this year relative to that 10-hour goal. We have students who have 100 hours and therefore 10 times the 10-hour goal. We have students who do not have any hours. I think it was an interesting exercise because it made the students a little bit more aware of the fact that they had nothing to put in there. And I thought that was a good reflective activity. That being said, the mechanism that we used was Naviance, which was incredibly cumbersome, and it is extraordinarily painful for me to clean the data to enter it. So I would really like to find another mechanism. But we do have data collected against a 10-hour goal, which over the 4 years of Greenwich High School would get you to 40 hours. I didn't know if that 50 was annually or cumulatively or...
Must be performed at times when school is not regularly in session and not less than 10 hours of classroom instruction that's related.
So I'm not
Saying we need the classroom piece. I'm just saying, let's pick a number and let's get it on the chart.
Dr. Francis.
I don't remember exactly how we got to it, but I think 10 was the number that we picked. So I don't recall the issue of elementary and later, and it sounds like you've collected it 6 through 12. Is that right?
Yes.
So I think what we did is we sort of said the goal was going to be for 6, I don't recall that. My sense is that we said the goal is going to be 6 through 12 because elementary school would be more difficult. And that we had set that number at 10, and we can certainly discuss it or something we want to change.
I'm glad
but-
to hear that's settled, that's great.
I think the open question though is,
What's our goal?
what's our percentage goal, right? How many percent of students do we want to see? We're at 38, do we want to see 50? What's a reasonable number? Have we done any looking at the outside as to what the expectations are? I mean, other than that, the state's 50 hours. Is there any literature out there about student volunteerism?
I'm sure there is, and we'll get that, and we'll let you know.
question for the staff. Some of the items appear to be new, but it may be me. It's been a while since I've seen the chart. The CCR course index, is that credit recovery by any chance? No? I don't remember.
College and career readiness.
College and Career Readiness Index, okay. So can you give just a one-sentence description of what you mean by index for those 4 index categories?
I would love to, and that will be part of the achievement report.
Oh, okay.
But overall, the state, 3 years ago, instituted an accountability index, and there are several metrics which align nicely with the goals that you established well before the state had an index. So I will go through all of those indicators, but the state has a formula.
Anything? Ms. Raven?
And did the targets come from the state? So if those were state numbers, how would the target of 75, 75?
Those are state targets.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else on the up here? Ms. Raven?
Sorry, well, if we're gonna do all targets, then the extracurricular participation, so we seem to be measuring that in some capacity, so if we have a goal. And then the national average sports participation, we're measuring that in some capacity, so we need to create a goal. And student well-being, how is that different than satisfaction? I mean, I think I know, but if we can just, because we seem to be measuring that as well, we need a goal.
Ms. Davis?
Looking for a comment or should I?
You got it, Jen?
That would be the same instrument, the panorama instrument, so when I come back and talk to you about where we are nationally, it'll be the time.
Ms. Davis?
I have another one that appears new to me. Again, I could be wrong. It's the bottom right square. It's called Communications Access. And under that, it says social media and website. In my mind, that's far less important than the other squares. I'm interested in other views and how that came about and why it's important. Because I can't tell you how many times I access Twitter a day. I get very little value. But I'd like to know more about the reasoning.
Um,
I think it's sort of aligned to what you actually just suggested in terms of the number of interactions as being more valuable for family engagement than the survey. So in addition to communication survey data that we would have, and we do have, we're also looking at, are people actually using the website? Are they getting information from it? Is it valuable? Things like that. That's the level of communications. That's why we felt it was important. It's related to engagement in terms of actual use.
Dr. Francis?
Just as a, I didn't know exactly what it meant. So classroom teacher attendance, 14.6 days. I'm quite sure they're here more than that, so.
That's the average absence of teachers against the state.
Ms. Raven?
So I think in some of these, it's helpful to know when the number is bigger is bad, and when the number is smaller, it's good. So like absenteeism indicator. So I think target 7.1, and the fact that we're at 3.9, that's good.
That's
we
good,
we
yes.
want to be less than that number, but then classroom teacher attendance, we also want to be lower.
I will put a little,
Yes.
yes.
Well, does that include professional development?
No, I think these are actual absences as opposed to training or
Right.
something else. Okay, Ms. Olson?
I'd be curious to see, I know we don't have a goal set for staff satisfaction, but there is often a link between staff satisfaction and teacher attendance. So if we can get more specific about, when we find out more about what actually that entails and what our goal is for the staff satisfaction, we can see, I mean, I wouldn't dream of taking 14.6 days as an educator, but So that seems shockingly high to me. So I'd be interested to see the connection between those two, absolutely.
Anything else on this chart? Let's move on to the rest.
Bob, can you enlighten us a little bit about absenteeism, just before we move off of that? Because that number is a little...
First time I'm seeing the 14.6. I know the state only categorizes certain portions of your absenteeism toward that number. And I know they exclude certain things, such as if somebody's out on a child-rearing leave all year, it doesn't count toward your absenteeism. So I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to look at the 14.6 to see what's behind that, because that seems kind of high to me. From this day to day, we manage the absenteeism, the substitute system for the district, and that just seems like a kind of a high number for me, but I'll have to take a look at it and get back to the board.
All right. This one, I'll resume with the rest of the presentation.
So as we developed together, board and administration, the strategic plan, we set out that theory of action of personalized learning. We have evolved to where we are passionate about making learning personal for all learners, adults and students. And so we, as a result of our work last year, we developed our roadmap so that we can show you the commitment to the innovation and the change in practice we want to see in teaching and in learning. So, and this was also developed with Dr. Gilday too, as a result of all the work. But we're passionate about that vision of the future where there are no boundaries to the learning. I won't read the slide, but you'll see what we've set out to communicate to our leadership team and to you. And that we do believe that personalized learning as that theory of action will ensure that all learners are empowered, that there are partners, they'll take ownership of their learning, and we are starting to see how they are self-regulating, which seems very abstract and high level, but even in kindergarten, we are seeing students knowing and managing their learning and articulating that what they can and cannot do. So we really are repositioning the learner from over here to the center and co-creating with them. It's amazing to see what we are able to do. So we wanted to share with you what our North Star is, and our North Star right now by the numbers is that by 2022, we will have made learning personal for all students and all classrooms will be engaged in that process. So this is our aim for all of our classrooms district-wide in developing those learner experiences that meet their needs, their strengths, their point of entry, their readiness, cultural competencies, and so on. So we're moving to that vision, or moving from the vision to the reality by 2022. Our definition of personalized learning still remains. We developed that together with you. Yes?
I believe Ms. O'Neill has a question.
It's fine to say where we want to be in 2022. Where do we want to be in 1920 and 2021?
That's a few slides in, so.
Okay, great, thank you.
Because yes, so how do you manage that, right? How do we get there? So we get there by making our definition that we co-created with you a reality. And we have landed and we are living with these three critical elements. So taking all of that research, and as I share with my colleagues district-wide, that it's great to be a name dropper, and all the research of Alison Zamuda, Jim Rickabaugh, Tom Vander Ark, and Benna Calic, all those people, they all say that there are critical elements that must be living in your school district or your classrooms in order to make learning personal. And so last year we landed on these three, because we felt that these three combined will develop student agency, where students can actually manage their learning as a partner with their teachers. So we are living, being partners in learning and cultivating meaningful partnerships, getting students to own their learning, and equipping both the teacher and the student with resources such as data and evidence to own their learning, set goals, and then the idea of student self-regulation. And these are the mindsets that we're developing in the classroom. So in February, we talked about the three levers of change in our strategic plan update then, and we said that these are the three critical levers, that if we work on these, we are going to make a difference and improve student achievement. So still making learning personal, how we empower our stakeholders, and redesign time and space. So This slide is presented here to share with you the identified levers of change on the left column in gray. The white blocks there, those are our building blocks. So in support of that, to make that happen, we have to address the curriculum. What is the learning experiences we want to see? How we're engaging family and the community. What are we doing with leadership? Because they have to help manage this innovation and prototyping that's happening across the district. And then what are we doing with operations and facilities? So you'll see if you move across, so this may help get to your question, Barbara, and then the next few slides. We have to give ourselves credit for the work that we have done since 2015. And so you can see that in the light yellow. And then the arrows continue the work out through those out years of what is happening. And some of this has evolved through implementation, and we've learned more with our partnerships, external partnerships, internal. And this is the work that we're doing to scale this work through 2022 to meet that, to get to that North Star. I can stop for a minute if there are questions about this, or perhaps this goes hand in hand with the next slide. So
one of the things that digital learning has done that's of tremendous value is it's increased the number of iterations in a work that's being completed. And it has increased the frequency of the feedback loops between the teacher and the student. And I'm wondering where that fits into 3 criteria for personalized learning. And then one more thing, self-regulation. Can you just give me a sentence so I make sure I fasten on the meaning of that from your perspective?
okay, and anyone can jump in. Yeah.
Just to jump in for a second, I think that the money that we invested 5 or 6 years ago now in the whole digital learning process was one of the best things that this district could have done. We moved from just going from digital learning to a blended learning environment, and now with some good guidance from the people back there in the seats and our coordinators and Irene, we're moving to personalized learning. So we made that investment many years ago, but it's starting to show fruit on the vine now.
So I just want to go to digital learning and
Feedback, and then what is self-regulation?
okay. So what we have found in leveraging the tools with digital learning, so it's a very dynamic digital learning environment, and I think what I've seen and what I've heard, and especially interviewing the 21 teachers in the pilot, they said having the tools in the dashboards, particularly with Dreambox, STMath, Khan Academy, and IXL, they sit side by side, and that dashboard is not just their dashboard for sharing out the information in a different way. The student is side by side with them, and they're reviewing that dashboard together. And because there's so many different tools within the system, so Dreambox has like a raise your hand, or they have the badges that are embedded within it, so they can see where they're progressing along a standard. And so they have a conversation about that, and then they develop a goal together. So again, I'll try to establish a through line. So being a partner in learning, sitting side by side, shoulder to shoulder, eye to eye. We're looking at the evidence. It's the students' data, so they're owning it. This is me. Is this an accurate picture of you? If not, what do you want to plan to do about it? And then they develop a goal together. So and sometimes the goals could be academic. What we heard from teachers that sometimes it was behavioral because they might not have been attentive to the task within the system. And if it wasn't in the digital system, if it was in more of the physical resources and learning that they were doing, then they had to set that type of goal. Then they develop another through the cycle of coming back. How's that working for you? What do we need to change? How do we iterate? What do we layer in so that you can achieve the target that you've set out to achieve? So it's like the idea of partners in learning and student ownership. And in that, students are realizing their knowledge and skills development and how they share it out, but they're also thinking about their own pace. So they're knowing, it's metacognition, knowing what they know and making the changes that they need. But they have the open space, they have the space within that learner experience to say, this isn't working for me. Here's what else I'd like to try. For example, we heard even at second grade, students in their process said, I want to take the assessment now, I think I'm ready. And the students had provided that space to say, okay, let's try that, and then we're gonna look at that evidence when you're done. And it wasn't at a time or cycle at the end of the unit where all students are in a batch setting to take that assessment. And that's the reality. That happened in second grade this past year. So again, that's those three critical elements.
Ms. Wilson.
So you said, just to back up a second, they're doing this one-on-one, they're students, sort of doing a one-on-one session with their teacher?
Correct.
Okay, and that's who they set their goals with, and then they may work independently, they may work as well with one another, and then come back and reassess with their teacher. At some point, they begin to sort of assess themselves.
Yes. And what this does in linking back to our vision of the graduate, we're linking it right back to that personal capacity of how they're owning their own data and they're actually responding and reacting to their evidence with resilience and themselves in that cycle.
Dr. Francis.
You'll see a lot of school improvement plans written in that way with that flow and alignment.
Dr. Francis.
It's, when you first said feedback, I actually was triggering a different thought, which, and I don't know that it necessarily has to fit into this, but you know, one of the goals, I believe, of the digital learning was teacher feedback on work. So more specifically, you hand in an assignment, how quickly you're getting feedback on that. You write a paper, how quickly you're getting feedback on that. So
And
not
that has changed, yes.
your success, but you know, that aspect, I think, is one of the goals in terms of the digital learning. That I think is separate than feedback on your overall achievement, more specifically on specific work that you're doing. And I assume that's something that's still strongly encouraged.
Oh, absolutely. And if I were to call it response time, you know, the response time to the learner when they submit their work, whether it's through Google Docs or through Notability or through, there's another digital tool with Turnitin, yes. The response time is that much faster so the students can act on it, self-regulate, and they're given more opportunities to demonstrate mastery of those targets by having that immediate feedback that way.
Is that being measured in any way?
No, it's measured in like how we're reducing the response time by student to student or in a particular class.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of thinking, you know, is there one teacher who tends to be very slow in getting back, another one who's very quick in getting back? Is that something?
Currently, we're not. I'm not measuring that, but certainly, I think it's a conversation that we could have with. I would start with the building administrators and then see where we can.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I think there are a number of things I've heard in the past that I don't know that this is something I would necessarily want for public consumption.
Sure.
You certainly don't want to identify individual teachers,
Correct.
but you know, you could have this is all whatever 113 teachers, and here's the graph, and you're A, and you only know that you're A, but you can see where you are relative to others in some type of measure that you're doing to get a sense of how you're doing with that, and whether you're sort of within the range of others, and whether the overall range is where we would want it to be.
So as the principals and the administrators do their observations, that's part of the conversation that they have. And when the teachers are doing their units, that is definitely addressed because it's a unit over time. So that's one of the things that the principals talk about, the students talk about, the teachers talk about. So it is monitored per se, but it's not something that I have not heard from any of the principals in the past 2 years that I've only heard from principals, maybe 2 or 3 teachers that were not doing feedback in a timely manner, and those teachers are worked with to make sure that they are doing that.
Mr. Scherer and then Ms. Stubb.
I just have a question for you first. The calendar that was reorganized, when are we going to talk about this again? Personalized learning this year? When's the next time this is going to be talked about in our schedule?
There should be 2 or 3 other updates on the strategic plan, so Kevin's pulling that out now, but it's probably January.
What do we expect? What do we expect to get from you guys at the January update? What would you be thinking you would be providing?
I think we would ask for your guidance to what you're looking for so that we can have that conversation.
It's January 26th, excuse me, that is your achievement data retreat, is what it is.
is so we're gonna get that would contain this exact subject
The
again.
mid-year checkpoint is February, for the strategic plan specifically.
Yeah, I know, there's a lot of elements to the strategic plan, so that's why I was asking about personalized learning specifically.
Well, it's part of what we do, so it would be in all of the academic quarterly updates that we'd be providing as well.
Okay, so let me give you feedback now.
Sure.
And then maybe if we're not gonna see it for, what is that, 5-6 months from now? But, I think, I'd be interested in understanding an actual rollout plan with goals, objectives, milestones, how will you actually know success? I'm looking at this document and this is when I know I've been on the board too long. I could take this chart right here and I can tell you every single one of these initiatives and words is the same thing we saw when DLE was pitched to us 5 years ago. And so I see that, yeah, anytime you go down one of these things where it's a technology leverage trying to change practice, which is what this exercise is, could be in a company, could be anywhere. This used to be called process re-engineering, but you know, that's what it is. And of course you've got all these elements to it and they kind of got them, you know, check the box, right? You need to go redo the content. You need to change the way the customer, in this case, the student, you know, at the point of interaction, change the way that works, right? You need to engage kind of other stakeholders in change. Somebody needs to be the leader, and you have to be sure you have the right infrastructure to be able to support the change. So, you know, check all those boxes in that chart. What I'm struggling with here is I don't actually understand from looking at this, you know, how this is actually going to happen and what is going to actually happen when. So I look at your next chart, which I think is 2 charts forward, and it's kind of like, yeah, we're going to do an implementation and we're going to kind of roll it out in waves, and that's great, I can see the waves, but there's no information about the waves, because if you look at wave 2, 3, and 4, it all says the same thing, right? Which is, oh, I'm going to roll it out to classrooms, grades with content and change the teacher role, right? So my point is that I don't have any idea what this program is. I'm biting my tongue because
Just ask, what do you want to know? I can
No,
tell you school by school.
I'd rather I read
Yeah.
candidly.
Mhm.
If I'm going to spend time sitting in a board meeting, okay, your time's precious, my time's precious. I would hope that I would have an interaction. If you want to send me a document in advance that I will read, I'll do my homework, which I think good students do their homework, right? I would hope somebody would be able to lay this out to me. I mean, what I'm struggling with as an example is I'm looking at curriculum. It says redo the curriculum. We've been redoing the curriculum since the day you arrived. So, I realize it's like a continuous process, but it's presented as kind of a, well, here we are, here's the start. We're on the start of this 5-year transformation journey. And it seems to indicate from reading the chart, you know, we gotta go redo all of our curriculum to facilitate this. So, as you can see from my perspective, it just kind of looks like the same stuff. Maybe from you guys, it's actually different. So I think what I'd like to see the next time you come is a deeper articulation of what is this change, how's it actually going to happen, what is actually going to change, and how are you going to, you know, roll it out, and what's the success metrics at every step of the way. The other part of this conversation is a little challenging for me, is every time we have a conversation, we're always talking about elementary. It's always personalized learning in the elementary school.
I was focused on your pilot that we've
Yeah,
done,
okay,
so that's why I
okay.
was using that as an example, as a
Right, but we
success
talk a lot,
metric.
and what I'm seeing at the other levels is, you know, the way we teach in elementary and the way we deal with kids in elementary is very different than the way we deal with them in middle school, which is very different than the way we do it at the high school, and that probably should be that way, right? I'm really interested in hearing, if we're going to have this progression of practice, what does that practice look like? What is it supposed to look like? Let's take, I'll give you an example. How is the teaching of calculus at the AP level in high school supposed to change? right?
Not much is driven by the College Board, but
Okay, but there's the
there's some
content,
things we have flexibility.
right, but the content there can't change, right? But the way that it gets taught, teacher practice could substantially change, right? Assessment could substantially change. There's a whole bunch of other things other than content that could change in that, right? So if we're trying to shift our whole district to personalized learning, I guess I'm interested in getting a little bit more detail on what does that change in practice look like, and what is your plan? I guess it's not going to take 5 years, over 5 years to actually execute that. And that's the piece here. I get that maybe this one's just kind of presenting here's an overview of the plan, and here's the big things we're going to work on. I'd like to see a lot more detail, because my frustration with these initiatives are they're historically, I won't go, I won't spend time on the past, but the past is instructive to the future. They're rich in jargon, and sometimes we lose the strength of the execution and getting to the result. We were talking about scorecard, right? I'm only invested in person. The reason I was invested in personalized learning part of the strategic plan was to change the trajectory of what the outcome was. And this was the big bet. So I really want to put a lot of wood behind that arrow on how we're going to actually change the trajectory.
So I think the exciting part is last year you were able to see some of the teachers present what they were doing differently in the classrooms.
I saw that.
So that's part of the plan, and each school, each principal has designed their Wave 2 plan as to how they're going to implement and what supports we're going to give them from central office. So we do have a plan, but it is a plan that is built around the readiness of each school and each principal who knows their teachers and what they're ready for and the support that we can give them. So you may have the schools all focusing on one part of those three levers that we're talking about. So it may be that everyone is going to focus on, I don't know, my brain's getting tired. What's the first one?
Partners in Learning.
Partners in Learning. So the entire school would be focusing on making sure that they're partners in learning and different ways of having partners in learning. But then there will also be a group of teachers who will become the masters in learning personalized and making sure that they know what the digital tools are, that they're using the resources of the curriculum that is flexible so that each child can get what they need. So it's not like we can give you a specific plan for every single classroom, but we can give you an overview of what an example is of what one school may be doing or one class.
I was just using that, I was using that as an example. I'm not interested in your program.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I just want to say to Peter that I was in an AP Psych ecology class yesterday at Greenwich High School with a teacher who I've known for a long time, who his primary method of delivery was standing up and lecturing. And yesterday, it was a whole different ballgame in his classroom. It was amazing. He had his kids broken up into groups. He was going around checking on their work as they learned material on their own. But he was there to guide them along. So teachers are starting to move forward with our plan, and it's great to say, it really is. But and I think one of the things you all need to do is to get into the schools and see it, because, and especially what I saw yesterday, because like I said, this is a person that got up in front of the classroom, AP Psych, and tried to get through that curriculum, and now he's getting through the curriculum in a completely different way, where the students have taken ownership of their own learning. So.
I sort of continue with that theme as this conversation evolves, but sometimes I must admit I get overwhelmed by all this jargon. But the good news is that I have 3 kids in the schools, and so I do see this every day. And I have the elementary perspective. I now have the middle school perspective, which is nice because that is different. But I can say specifically when you're talking about teachers giving you feedback immediately, there was one teacher that I said, please go to bed, because my son was getting feedback so quickly. And he was, he had progressed astronomically by the morning. So I just think that sometimes it's really hard to communicate what our kids are experiencing, but that's where it's really nice to interact with them, and then you'll sort of see the living proof of it.
Ms. Olson?
Yes, thank you. I think that, just on the feedback comment real quick before I forget, we talked earlier about quantifying and qualifying feedback, and sometimes that can be very hard to quantify and qualify. It's personal, how much a family does get involved, but I do think that our schools do a very good job from what I've seen of reaching out and making that effort. And it's exciting. I think it's a good thing that curriculum is on here every single year. I've never ever seen a school that doesn't continually tweak the curriculum. So if a school ever says curriculum's not a goal, then we need to, then that would be a big red flag for me. So I've seen it exciting, it's student-centered, it's personalized choice it's huge because they have autonomy, and then they I see it everywhere, but they come home and and they go to their parents and say, I'm so excited I'm doing this activity, and the choice is new and the choice is great. And I think one question I would have is just how much, I don't know if it's hard to quantify or qualify, but how much time they actually are on the iPads, how much screen time they are actually having. Because I think my concern is just the pendulum swinging a little too far. I think just personally, from my standpoint in education, I think that some direct instruction is definitely important. There's a bit of lecture, there's a bit of this, and then there is, and I've said this before, and when we were talking about redesigning the classrooms, and the group work is fantastic, but I think it has to be a combination. And I know that for some students, the paper to pencil, the pen to paper actually does help. I mean, the research shows that a lot of times that does help them retain the information. So there's something to be said for the writing and the actual sort of old school philosophy. So I guess what I'm asking, it's not directed, I guess what I'm asking is just, is there a way we can find out how much time, if we can quantify sort of like how much time they actually are on the iPads versus how much of the time they're doing other things? Because I know there are exciting hands-on activities, and I echo Mr. Miller's sentiments. This is exciting what's happening, and I've seen the benefits of it firsthand. But that's something that I've heard as concern from others, and also have seen it, in my own situation.
Ms. O'Neill?
I'd like to go back to what Mr. Scherer said, and looking for more specificity in this chart. What grade levels, what's the goal for the grade level? How are we going to measure success? So at the end, how will we know we've reached our goal if we haven't had goals in between, and looking for specific things in different grade levels as we go along, and difference in teacher performance? It's great to have all this anecdotal stuff, but because all the anecdotes are usually pretty good, but I think we need to get a broader picture of how successful we are, and what are we doing in each of these grades, and what's the focus.
Ms. Reagan?
Yes, sorry don't want to be piling on. It would be helpful because it does say all schools, and the fact that wave 2, wave 3, wave 4 repeat. If there was just some sense, I agree with Mr. Scherer and Ms. O'Neill. We'll know we get to 100% in 2022, but what if our goal was to be at 75% in 2020 and we were only at like 40%? Like, there needs to be some sort of like tick mark, or milestone. Thank you.
Ms. Dean? All right, Ms. Priest.
That's okay. So a helpful suggestion is, when we get the document that we get annually on the school improvement plans, each building should write them differently to give us a window into actual practice in each school. It should be far less numerical and much more descriptive. I haven't read ahead in our agenda. I don't know if that document is already written. I hope it's not written yet, but I would love to see a new way to present the school improvement plans.
So just to give some clarity around this, so every pilot school, because you can't just, you have the pilot, we learned a lot from the pilot, and then they were asked to iterate, which is just a part of the design cycle. So they developed an iteration plan that was specific to what they've learned with the pilot and how they're going to progress. How are they going to continue that work and scale it? We also then asked the same thing of all of the schools, because again, it was a pilot, we've learned from that pilot, it's what we do now. This is our business, this is our work. So every school had to develop that plan. So I do have by the numbers, by percentages for each school, whether it's 16% next year and then 44%. I mean, we have those numbers calculated because we have to manage. We have to be able to give them centralized support. And I'm lucky to have my academic team here, but we are the team. And then you have the coaches. So we wanted to make sure that that they had autonomy to identify their team where there's some capacity, a concentration, and willingness to innovate, but also giving them a chance to prototype on it, like we did with the pilot, prototype, figure out how to scale that, but also then manage that innovation. And the building principals need to be able to manage that too. That's why the wave-based approach is a successful research-based approach. I mean, I didn't come up with that. That's what other districts in scaling personalized learning have done. So I have the information school by school, year by year, and who their teams are. The actual teachers and how many teachers by grade, because then what we want to do is partner them as well across the district, all the kindergarten first, or even K2, 3, 5, and so on. And this goes all the way through the high school. So we have gone beyond, we've expanded beyond an elementary math pilot. This is across all content, across all grade levels, across all of our schools. And I think that's an accomplishment that we should be proud of. And with regard to the digital learning, we've expanded beyond the digital learning. There were 5 goals. One was the Smarter Balance. We are prepared for the Smarter Balance. And then it was about personalizing learning, so we're continuing that work. The feedback loop. I mean, we had those identified goals. We've expanded beyond that. I was here when that plan was developed and that work. What we should really recognize is how it's not just the digital tools doing personalized learning to the students. That we're making it personal with the teacher and the learner and the tools, whether they're physical, digital, or human. And I think that's an important thing to celebrate as well. So as you say, with screen time, if the child needs to access something that's offline, they have that ability, and we make that happen for them. So we are expanding on all things that we have done, and they're all connected. So I can certainly provide individual school information with percentages, maybe perhaps. That's what I thought I heard, so I want to make sure I understand when I leave here what should be shared back. Or perhaps between the chair and the superintendent, you can.
Dr. Francis.
So I think it ties to that and another comment, which is I think let's be sort of careful in our planning here. One, I think in terms of our school improvement plans, I know that we've sort of been hammering for a number of years, we want SMART goals, we want clear goals, so let's not whiplash too much away from that. I think certainly having descriptions of what's going on is great as well, so let's make sure we are balancing that, but our implications are not to this. Because I know you said that a lot, so I think I don't think we want to throw that out the window. I think it's nice to have those clear SMART goals as well. I think it's tricky because I don't think we want a 50-page report on every detail of what's happening in every school. On the other hand, this is so broad that I feel like it's at the other extreme. So I don't know if there's something that can be created that's a little bit in the middle that helps us to be able to get a sense of how progress is occurring or what milestones are being reached. So, I'm completely making this up, but now we have 10% of our schools are at least at a 30% of whatever you're measuring. And maybe what we want is that next year it's 20% of our schools are at least at 30, or whatever those, some way in which you're measuring this. You're talking about 14% here or 30% there. So I don't think we need the detail of exactly which school is at exactly which point, but what are some steps that as you look at this data and as you pick out what are the key points that you can give us that would help us to follow along with you. Sure. So we can say, great, we have shifted a little bit farther in this direction, or more schools are deeper into it. So whatever way seems most appropriate, I think, to have some summary that's a little bit in between the two extremes of giving us a bit more information in terms of how we're progressing.
So we're back at our aim. So again, through all of this work in the continued innovation and implementation of the strategic plan, making that come off the page and a reality in our schools. We want to reach that North Star. Yes, and I think, so I'm going to just go back. So again, we have our levers of change, our building blocks, and the work. These correlate to project plans, and one of the project plans, which was not set, we did not realize the need back with the digital learning, is now the learner profile, the PLP. So we do want to take you through the work that we have done there with the PLP app in ECRIS and the learner profile. Yes, and this is for the teachers, so when you talk about being partners in learning, this is we're trying to move off the term data and use the term evidence. So that here's all of the evidence that you, like you said, quantifiable and qualifiable, what we look at to develop a learning plan.
Susan. All right, so I can't do a live demo for you because of privacy and confidentiality. So what I have is a series of excellent screenshots that have been anonymized. So this is where a principal would enter. Teachers actually only have the My Students in the PLP app. Is it the red button? Is it the right button? Is it the... Got it. Okay. So all somebody has to do is type in a partial of the student's name, and those students will automatically show up. I could type Brown and all the Brown children. How that works. There are a series of filters on the left side so that if I wanted within my school to identify all the students who have an IEP, I could do so. But basically you get a broad list of children, and then once you have selected your student, we work very hard to get the photos in. I'm very proud.
They're not our students.
Those are not our students. Those are stock students from the internet.
There's somebody.
Right. But the photos really did make a difference because I think it brings it home that you are looking at a particular person. Right. Exactly. So here we have anonymous stock high school boy.
1960.
Attendance record.
Obviously, it would include the student's name and their student ID, their grade, but this shows you the broad tiles that we have, and then I have some detail. But the first page has a series of tiles, volunteer hours, their designations, if there were any of the high needs categories, and it does, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner of each of the tiles that there's a history. So there's additional detail behind it, but the most current information appears on the front page.
So the teacher clicks on history and then it expands with more detail, more evidence.
We have a complete assessment history. We have their coursework and their grades. Grades again. We have the attendance, student versus the district average. We then have extracurricular activities and a cumulative weighted GPA that is compared to the grade level average. There was a notes field, but at this point we are not using that. All right, so this is the additional detail you would get if you were to drill down into the assessment data. I went through this with leadership as well as teachers at the PD, and they were very pleased that they could see going back 4 or 5 years. You can filter it on the left, you can see by subject, so it can be a little overwhelming because we include all of the STAR data, F&P, if we have a COGAT on them, that's in there, the SAT, the PSAT, the SBA, so for some of them, this goes on fairly long, but if you filter it by subject, then you can quickly see, oh, how is the student doing in math? What have they been doing over 3 or 4 years, as opposed to just looking at what was your last SBA score, okay, I know what you were just then, but to really look at the trend of the child over time. We then have volunteer hours. And this is where it gets a little labor intensive because this description, I have children who are helping out with little kids at water polo, and the turkey trot. We've collected this for as many students who participated, and actually massaging that to fit this is lengthy. But it does give us a sense of the hours, and with the 10-hour per year target, I think it really does make it, students can see, okay, well, we know that the National Honor Society children are pumping it through. But for those who are not, aspiring to that, at least an awareness of their good volunteer contribution. We then collecting the extracurricular activities. Extracurricular is a combination of both their FCAC sports participation as well as any self-reported. And this is just related to Greenwich Public Schools. This doesn't include, I'm a member of the Boys and Girls Club, or I'm on the Marlin swim team. That's not that. This is just Greenwich Public Schools, because the tile that you've articulated is specifically, are they engaged with Greenwich Public Schools?
Do you want to ask Jen a question?
Jim, why are we working on self-reporting? I mean, that's survey, that's not really.
Yes. Yes.
Why are we doing this?
There is no other articulated mechanism.
So you're saying we don't have anywhere in our systems? We don't have anywhere in our systems that a student was on one of our teams? We don't have the roster?
No, sports I absolutely have the rosters, and that gets automatically uploaded. But if I participate in an anime club, that's something I'm trying to remedy. But right now, there is no.
I thought Daisy Fox kept track of all that. No?
You remember from the whole student development report, I always report how much difficulty we had with that. Even if you look at the yearbook and they say anime club, I don't know if he went once to anime club or if he went every week and was president of anime club. And there's really no attendance taken at clubs. It's really hard to capture until we get to some sort of electronic.
Don't we pay teachers to?
Some of them are scheduled, and some of them are volunteers. This is an ongoing conversation.
Because, I know in the labor contract, teachers wanted to pay stipends, and the rules are you cannot have a club if you don't have a paid teacher as a mentor. So.
But you're all in my anime club.
Right.
Right. On Tuesday it's raining, you're the only one who shows up.
Right.
So
Couldn't
I
we
still have to be there.
In fact, I'm not paid to be the mentor for the anime club.
Wait a minute. We need to go back here. Let's go back. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Sorry,
Sorry.
I'm in too deep. My point was, I want to be sure that what's in the system is, the idea when we went down this road was to be sure that the only data that we were entering in here was reliable data that we, in our school system, could know and verify, right? So, and this is the first time I've heard that, okay, in order to get at that problem, because we didn't seem to solve it internally, we said, well, let's survey kids and ask them what they did. And that's just new to me. It's a new, it's different than what we discussed before.
It's not perfect information, I absolutely agree with you. Perhaps with the new director of student activities, we can assist. It's certainly something I'd like to.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, just Peter, so you know, we've been struggling with this for, I was the director of student activities in 1990.
Oh, there you go.
So this is an easy one to solve, because as Mary was pointing out, sometimes they can show up, sometimes they don't, and so who do we count as being in the club and not? So that's that's one part of what I wanted to say. The other part was, most of the teachers that are running clubs are not getting paid. So the people on Schedule C, the yearbook, the beak, debate, the math, those people are getting paid. And then most of the other people are not. So I just want to clarify that. That's not an excuse for not taking attendance, but I'm just saying.
Ralph, and I realize, this is going to be hard for you, right? Because I I'm gonna ask these questions, and unfortunately, they harken back to something we were told previously, so it may sound like, oh wow, I'm torturing you, I'm not. It's that the staff has been here before and we've covered these things, and I have this weird habit of having to stay track of the line, so I remember what was said the last time. I just take in what it is, and that's why I'm just saying I'm a little lost in the conversation, but okay, now we get the update, we are where we are now.
Ms. Reagan?
I don't think I have heartburn that somebody signs up for a club and doesn't always attend, because not every child on a sports team gets put in the game either. I know they practice, so I just don't have as much heartburn being so accurate, because not every person plays in the game either.
Okay, so Anime Club would be on this list in addition to their FCI participation. This is the attendance screen if I were to drill in, and this is a percentage, not a number of days attended, and I think that's my last one. Yes, excellent. So that is the detail that teachers have available to them when they drill into their PO.
So I guess, Jen, the question is then, if a teacher is looking at the SBA, if they want to dig into the data for the SBA, they've got to go outside of the system to get that, right?
If they want to see the specific detail of how a student did on various strands, yes.
And there's no way to ever link that up, or is that something we're thinking about?
At first said they would never do that, that's not their role. That teachers would have to, the same with STAR, if they wanted to drill into the detail by standard, you'd have to use that particular system. That's not how they developed ECRIS.
You can see the general scores, but not necessarily the detail by
Right, like
subject.
claims and targets.
So you could see math over the last 5 years,
Yes.
but not necessarily, I'm going to mix up, but not necessarily angles or.
Correct, that you can go
perimeter
into that
data.
assessment.
But if you just wanted to get a sense of the students has progressed in this way over math in general,
Right.
that you
The
could see
growth,
here.
you can see the growth.
Yes, ma'am.
And so just to confirm, this is for grades 6 through 12?
No, the POP exists for every student in the district.
Okay, well, some of it's not relevant, I guess. Okay, and then just the particular teacher of that student has access to it at that time, or anybody can look up?
Principal, the building administrator or the teacher, because you can only see the data of the students that you serve.
Ms. Wilson?
So just to clarify, if you can see the data of the student that you're teaching, but let's say 6 through 12, so multiple students, you can see your student, and I'm teaching world language. Can I see Mr. Scher's? Can I also see how the student's doing in math, or is it just the world language?
No, you can see their activity across all of their classes.
Right, okay. As long as it's a shared student?
Yes.
Right, okay. Because that can be helpful also.
That's
There's
right,
times when students
exactly.
might say, oh, this is my worst grade, and this is my, and
We're on
you can
trend.
actually say,
We see
okay, I
across
think this
all
is
of
the
the
trend, you know, so
classes.
it's helpful to be able to.
Can you go back to the first slide?
First.
So you're hitting the left button.
Yeah, that one.
Yep.
Okay.
This one? Yes.
And then the next one. Okay, is there a slide about student growth?
The growth is seen in, there's actually an advanced view on assessment. Put that up, but there is additional detail on this question.
So if you click on that, then you would see the growth.
The best way to view growth is actually on the growth scatter plot, because then it puts it in the context relative to benchmark and the river, or you've seen those.
Yeah.
Yes.
We sent them, but I think,
Particular student
yes, that's the
within
question.
whatever group you're looking at.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused as well, because I thought the idea was for each individual student, we were not just tracking their grades, but using it to project where that individual student is going to be. So is that not
No,
contained in their
That's in the
POP?
show advanced view. I did not show No, you can't click on it now.
Yes, sure. Did this thing come out of the box this way from Ecris? Or did we design this, or how did we wind up with this?
This is the product as it is currently offered by Acris. I have asked for certain modifications.
So the way John got it designed, you tell me the way that John got it designed the product is the learner profile does not have on the front screen of the learner profile anything about student growth. That's the way it comes out of the box, and that's a portal view. That's kind of like, I can see there's tiles, presumably those were selectable, but I don't know enough about this product.
This is the product as we purchased it. I was told recently that there are additional, I know that we've eliminated, that we don't have data for several of the blocks that they have proposed. They did create some new blocks, and I'm going to go through them and see what is applicable. To some extent, we're limited to what data do we have that's available, but I happen to agree with you.
I guess, Ralph, the thing on this thing for me, it's leaving me puzzled, because I'll do the bridge, because otherwise it'll just sound negative to you, is this thing got started, Bill McCursey bought this thing because he said I needed a central repository for all data. So he bought a data warehouse. Fine, great, wonderful, okay. Then he bought on the front end of it, essentially a growth model. He said, I'm going to use the repository to mash all the data, so now I can project a growth model. And the purpose, our board had multiple retreats with the brain trust from this company on this very subject, right? And if I recall properly, maybe you'll all tell me otherwise, the big takeaway of that is, stop talking about the kind of stuff you get in STAR, stop talking about the kind of stuff you get in SAT, right? That's rear view looking. The genius of what they had was they had an algorithm that was very well developed that would say, how much growth is this student supposed to get? So it started to look at the kid as the individual rather than looking at it old style. And we were supposed to be able to give the teacher in the classroom, right, real-time data to grade. It had the last assessment in it, and it was recalculating based upon the last assessment that was added. So it was longitudinal, which is right. And it would say, this kid's either on track with the kind of growth they're expecting, or they're not on track, right? And so it was very personalized. And then what it was supposed to do, which is why I'm interested in this thing on strands, it was supposed to be able to give them a drill down to say, oh, and by the way, here's the thing that of the 20 things the kid is working on, whatever content area or subject, that is causing them not to get where they needed to be. So it was very attractive because it was actionable intelligence in the hands of a teacher, and it's real time and it's updated. So I'm kind of surprised that thing isn't the center of what we're looking at. I mean, this is a great repository for other stuff, but probably like student information systems do this too. So, and probably they do it better than this thing does. So I'm sitting there wondering where we lost the plot on student growth and that whole thing, and is there, but maybe I misunderstood what it is we're doing. This is kind of a little bit like, boy, this is going to be a tough night, I'm sorry. I know it's sounding negative, but I don't mean it to be negative. I thought this was the greatest thing since sliced bread because it provided data analytics tools to the teacher where the teacher didn't need to be a data analyst. It was like, wow, that's really cool, let's do that. And that just isn't leaping off the page for me here, so I don't know where the disconnect is, but then maybe the next time we get the update, I would love to, if everybody's in agreement that we still like that vision, I'd like to get an update of how do we get to what it is we've been talking about for the last 3 to 4 years. So, and I don't want to put the team on the spot right now, maybe it's a follow-up. Did I miss anything, guys?
I was
Okay.
gonna completely agree with the growth component of it. I'm not sure exactly what's in that show advanced view, but it does seem like it'd be really nice to pull some of that out to that front page, because I think that's important. So I'm not sure if it's in there, we're not seeing it. I don't recall the drill down to the specific strands necessarily being part of that quiz. I agree that that's something that we want teachers to be able to do, but I wasn't sure if that was necessarily part of that quiz. But certainly without a doubt, the green dot, the blue dot, I forget the colors, but there was 3 dots. And you're basically looking at where's your growth and where are you relative to the benchmark. And those were the 2 pieces of information you wanted to see fairly quickly in your ability to evaluate a student. And so it seems like that is something we should pursue, either really bug ECRIS to do it if they're not, or make sure if that's available that we are doing it.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we understand, we haven't lost sight of that and that work and that language. It's just viewable in a different app. So right now in this particular app, that's not visible on that front landing page.
Irene, I totally agree with that. My point is if somebody, I design these things for a living, run companies that do this, and we build products all the time. Here's the one watchword, okay? If somebody has to go 5 clicks to go find what's the most important, then the thing wasn't designed right. So, I know John, he knows all this, and we've had this yeah, so I don't know where the wheels came off the car, but anyway, my question would be, what can we do to help you? What can we do to help you, Ralph? To if this is still where we want to go, if this is still the view and the vision, what can we, and maybe you guys need to think about it. What can the board do to support you in getting to that place? Mr. Mayor.
Peter, I think we absolutely want to go where you're describing. I don't know if it's the right tool to get us there. So we're going to have to go back and take a hard look at what ECRIS can and cannot do for us. But we want to do what you just described.
Okay. Ms. Dell.
Yes, I agree. I think that at the time that this was purchased, that there were certainly some innovative ideas, but I think like any software, you want to revisit. And it's been 5 years, I think it's...
I've seen this software before, and I've seen it from John, so I know it's in this product. I don't know how those 2 things got disconnected. I've seen it before. It's there. I know it is.
Oh, the growth is available. It's just not in this particular field.
I see.
Ms. Dell.
So as we do this, I think it is important, and I think Ralph is going there, is to see how much this costs, how much we paid for it, how much it's going to cost going forward. Does it need to be customized to achieve what you're asking to achieve, or perhaps we've already paid for that? I'd love to know all that as we assess the software.
Anything else on this? Okay, with that, I think we will close out the strategic plan update. We're going to get another one January. January we get the achievement. All right, next up is the academic quarterly update. Oh, hang on, one more question for Dr. Francis. We're going to be
Is it worth us, I know, is it worth us trying to summarize what our questions are, or even having a quick conversation about what we want to see in the next one before we get to that presentation?
I think that's fair. I think maybe with the superintendent, because he's going to start doing updates, is signal to the board that he would like suggestions. I think that's probably the best way to do that. So in advance of that meeting, with enough time to give staff to respond to it. All right, so moving forward to the academic quarterly update.
Thank you. So before I share our first approach to providing an annual academic update, I do want to introduce my A team, which I just realized tonight. A team. So much like the TV show, they are members of the GPS Special Forces unit. Known as my academic team, my colleagues. So together, we are charged with creating the conditions for a coherent and aligned pre-K-12 continuum of learning and learning for all learners. This team helps us, the district, other departments around the table here to ensure that all schools have what they need, all physical, digital, and human resources required to make learning personal every day. They are the advocates and innovators of our learners and learning, so I do want to introduce them. So Laura White, who recently got married. Laura Newell is her name now. So she's our arts coordinator. Sheila Saval, our STEM coordinator. You may want to. Lori Elliott, whom you met last year, our humanities coordinator. And to our team, let's see, coming Adrian Hirsch-Klein, our languages coordinator. ESL World Language. Bob Hipson, library media services coordinator. Bonnie O'Regan, our ALP facilitator. And new addition to the A team, Jeremy Boland, our physical education, wellness, and family consumers finance coordinator. So together, we have put together this annual report for you. So in your board packet, you have that. It's presented in 3 sections, trying to give you enough information to share our process. So section 1 is our curriculum, or I provide a summary for you just to kind of give you what do we believe in our curriculum development, which is ever evolving, as you had said before. Section 1 is our curriculum renewal process, and this is our lead driver in the process to curriculum design and development to ensure that the curriculum is responsive, that it's relevant and fresh and innovative annually for our students. Because we learn from them, we learn through implementation that there are some things that may need to be enhanced or layered in. So to support our understanding of the process, we consider the Institute as a starting point, so if you need a timeline. So in August, we have the Institute that leads off all of the implementation for this year. So right now, as we embark from September to May, think of that as a new timeline where the teachers are implementing what has been renewed, not changed or redeveloped, but what has been renewed. We collect feedback as a team from the teachers through that implementation and from the administrators from varied mechanisms. And then by March, we're already planning for the Institute. So we develop an action plan with SMART goals so that we can achieve that percentage by the end of the Institute. And then we come back to August where we are providing those updates with our teacher colleagues and sharing with them what has been renewed. And that leads right into section 2, where we've provided you with a summary by department, by program, of what phase of renewal or curriculum design and development we are in, what was our focus this summer, and what was the outcome, and then the timeline. So you can see that a lot of work has been done to ensure that the curriculum is matched to that learning space. So if we're trying to make learning personal and realize that vision and develop the capacities of the vision of the graduate, they need the curriculum to do that. The standards have not changed. We're still committed to the standards that have been approved. It's the learning experiences that are changing, and they're changing as early, even right now, like today, we're seeing new approaches to teaching and learning. So that's what I've shared with you in this chart. Then the section 3 section 2 speaks to our curriculum management, so how we manage it. This chart was shared with the board back in 2014, so this just shows you our cycle of design and development. And there's going to be moments where you'll see a curricular area in more than one phase. So while we're analyzing it through implementation, we are also designing the renewal process for it. And I don't anticipate a significant redesign or development other than in one area of career and technical education, that because there's so much emerging now out of the reauthorization of Perkins and with ESSA and college and career readiness and those career pathways, that may call for a significant redesign and development. There are other areas within the Institute summary where we've triggered that work will have to come back to you for approval, such as the social justice course. It's a new course they want to propose, and with that, we always present the curriculum behind it. They were working on that this summer so that we can now have the package to present to you. Here's the course, here's the curriculum, and then, if approved, resources, the instructional resources will follow. So that's been a bit of a shift. And then the last section is finally our eye towards the future. So what do we envision? And this is anchored in the research of people smarter than myself in curriculum design and development. So what are we doing to go beyond 21st century skills and how to be future ready? And again, how are we ensuring that the curriculum never gets dated and that it is responsive to the personalized learning experiences we want to see happen in the classroom? And we have to innovate through, inside out, and that's why we have the Institute. And we are very proud of this process that we have established for a number of years that also provides embedded professional learning for the teachers.
Ms. Rabin.
So in section 1, the chart, so I agree that is a significant body of work. At first I was confused just because the title, and it should have been obvious to me that the curriculum would have been done in the summer. But the focus and the timeline, I was thinking, is that happening in the fall? Not that it happened already.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you're right.
And then the phase of development, I think some of the Roman numerals might have gotten transposed, because sometimes analysis is listed as 6, sometimes it's listed as Roman numeral 4, and renewal sometimes is listed as 4 and 6, so that's just maybe a slight correction to the document.
You always have the eagle eye.
I know, I can't help it.
Ms. Tatum.
When I look at 1819, I'm very enthusiastic because it looks to my eye as if we have pretty much all the major academic areas with the exception of social studies. In the block that's in the second row to the bottom under phase 5. Does everyone have this chart? What's this one?
Chart 1.
What is the board's role in curriculum evaluation? Because I think the board needs to set goals later tonight. I want to understand.
I think we can discuss that. I know that there are new policies that we can review, but again, our processes are aligned to those policies 6140 and 6141. I think through our evaluation as the academic team, then we can determine what is in significant redesign or development that requires board approval, and then we would usher that through. So I think some of it's to be determined, but the standards where we are right now and a lot of the work that we've been bringing forward through monitoring reports has been brought to the board, such as NGSS. That's been 5 years, 6 years.
6 years.
6 years in the making. We've been providing those updates. Social studies is under humanities because we're trying to operate more as that type of interdisciplinary approach. We kept science separate because it's specific to NGSS, but it's all things STEM. So I would look for your guidance on that as we, now that we have the new policies, but also I will do my best to make sure that we usher those things through that require your approval. We've already established a procedure for textbooks, for other resources, new courses that falls in line with those policies. If it's specific, we're going to try and test it out with social justice. If that course comes through, the curriculum is behind it so that you can actually see and approve the curriculum.
As a follow-up, I have a big picture view of curriculum.
Okay.
So I'm not talking about new courses. I'm talking about how effective is the fill in the blank humanities curriculum. And I know we get monitoring reports, but it seems that we're entering phase 5, which is a much deeper look. And I want to make sure that the board is involved.
Okay.
That's something to be discussed in the goal setting.
Mr. Sher.
It's interesting to be, to Irene's point, it's kind of interesting to be told. The process now is a little bit weird in that someone goes away and develops a curriculum, right? we kind of get a monitoring report in an area, and maybe, there's 20 other things in that report. So maybe a board member happens to comment on something curriculum related. Okay, and then the second interaction is, to your point, okay, after something is developed, which seems to me a little bit odd, that we spend all this time and money on something, and then it's brought to the board, right? Like, it seems to me maybe a better way to do that is maybe with a two-step, which is, you know, maybe somebody comes and makes a new course proposal, right? And you bring it to the board with like a single cover sheet and say, the board then says, yeah, I'm interested in having you develop that course, or no, I'm not interested in having you develop that course, right? Before all the work happens. And
That was the process that we have had, but what I heard all of last year, I'm trying to be responsive to the board needs.
Sure.
We got
What are you
questions
saying,
during.
we confused you?
Yes. So when we proposed new courses,
Right.
we did not bring forward the curriculum. We might have some samples to provide to you, but the ask was, well, what does the curriculum look like in order to make an informed decision on approving this course? So,
I think I read my own.
And we always said we don't wanna
I
do the
wanna-
work
I don't want to get into
before.
the deep of telling you how to do it, right? That's for you guys to figure out.
I'm
I'm just
looking
saying
for
as
guidance.
as a board member, on one person, maybe the other seven will disagree with me. But it seems to me, maybe from just, you were asking a general question about process, and somebody smarter than me should go away and think about that, is I would hate you guys to do a whole bunch of work and people invested in it, and then it comes and gets presented, and I go, oh God, that is absolutely, and there's no way in 100 years I'm approving that, right? So I feel like if I do that, I've just like totally wasted good people's time on work. So I don't know if there's a way to maybe do it in two steps, so maybe people don't burn up a lot of hours.
I
And
agree,
maybe-
I'm just trying to be responsive to what I heard last year.
No, I understand that,
so-
I understand that.
okay.
Maybe
So
if
perhaps,
we're confused, it's just a suggestion, but maybe nobody agrees, I don't know.
I mean, we can certainly, after the new courses are approved, which is early on, and then they become part of the program of studies, we do develop the curriculum. The curriculum itself could come back as part of the process, once developed, after the course has been approved.
So I think the two-step is an interesting idea. I think we need to be disciplined enough not to expect too much in the first step.
Totally.
Right, so that I think if we understand that it's a two-step process, it's, you know, I think somewhere along in one of our communities, we talk about, you know, do we first start at quarter-baked or half-baked or three-quarter baked? Like, what is your first step and what's your second step? You know, I think that first step one is, here's a course we're thinking about, this is how we think it would fit into the general concept, this is what we have and what we think is added by putting in this new course. And it gives us the opportunity, hopefully not to be too involved below where we're supposed to be, but to give some feedback to say, yeah, that's an interesting point, you know, we agree that it makes sense to go ahead and pursue developing that further. Then it comes back with more curriculum and more fleshing out, and then we go ahead and officially approve it. I think we do need to be disciplined enough not to expect too much from the first part. But then I think we do expect when it comes back the second point, for there to be that further fleshing out. So I think that, you know, there is potentially some benefit to that. It's just sort of figuring out how much baked we want at each step, and then
That may change the cycle of new courses coming through, so that we have the time to honor that two-step process, which makes sense. And so it may mean a moratorium this year, so that we can come at an appropriate.
No, I think.
You mean if we want to enact on that process?
Yeah, I wouldn't change it midstream, but I would say, you know,
Okay.
typically they come, I forget what the timeline is. Well, let's say
November,
typically they come to us in
yeah.
the fall,
Mhm.
then it might it be for not for this round, but for the next round to say, okay, maybe in the spring, you come up and say, here are the courses that we're thinking about fleshing out over the summer to have it prepared for you in the fall, and then you
As
give a little
first
bit of
step.
feedback at that time, and then the fall. I wouldn't put the brakes on it, personally, I wouldn't put the brakes on anything that's already in process, but I think as sort of the next step, that might be a way to do that two-step and allow a little bit of earlier.
That makes sense, yeah.
I'm only hearing half the conversation because I've got a head full of cotton at this point. So I'm not sure I heard it right, but I think the process we talked about before is to have it, the overall goal presented and then have people work on it and then come back to the board with it. So there is enough time. So this is like almost a 1.5-year process. And the other thing that sometimes is lacking when courses come to us, where does it fit in the sequence? You know, what is this and what is the need that this particular course is going to fill?
Which is why we had the intersection with the course of study guide, so that you could see it in the whole scope of that particular pathway.
Well, I don't know if the course of, well, yeah, okay,
We
yeah.
tried that.
But anyway, I think where it fits in the broader picture and to give us time and the people time instead of trying to develop this whole curriculum over the summer. And the other point, and I'll go back to something about what is already in existence. You know, does the state have something? Do other, do companies have something we can adapt? I mean, we don't have to always go to scratch, considering what we're paying for staff development. I think there's other ways of, because when teachers aren't trained as curriculum writers, you know, so we have to go and get what's already been done and then adapt that rather than starting from scratch.
And I agree with you, and I think the Institute has allowed us to develop curriculum cadres. It's the same people, so we have trained them as curriculum writers. Not everyone likes to be a curriculum writer, but I want to make sure we understand that we're not overhauling the curriculum. If you look at the chart, you'll notice with humanities, we have the curriculum. The curriculum is a standards-based written curriculum, has big ideas, essential questions, concepts and skills and everything. What we found is what the teachers needed was to unpack the standards. We never did that work. It was a rush to implement the Common Core aligned curriculum. So the work that Lori had spearheaded was time to unpack them and develop I can statements or learning targets. So now translate that to the classroom. When the students are developing goals or the teacher is using curriculum playlists as a way to deliver, it's aligned to that learning target. That wasn't in existence before. That's not an overhaul of the curriculum. It's now making it, as what we've heard ever since 2012, making it relevant to the teachers so that they can access that resource and make it happen in the classroom.
So on that point, I think that's a big compound question, which is, do those materials get put into the curriculum mapper? So can we see that? And then how do you actually take what you're doing with that renewal over the summer and getting it to the teachers so that they can action it immediately in the fall?
So yes, it is, because that's our guarantee, our promise, that all of the written curriculum is within Aspen as our repository. It's also linked to other Google sites that the programs might have decided to use, or definitely through Schoology. Again, that's our other commitment as our learning management system. We've heard the same thing year over year because we've always tried to be responsive again to the buildings and the teachers, and we gave back the first professional learning day to the schools to do what they needed to do. This year we took it back. So we developed a conference, and part of that conference were required but indispensable sessions for curricular updates. So the team created these opportunities, 90 minutes at a clip, or 60 to 90 minutes, where they got, I mean, if I have to use the word mandatory, yes, mandatory. They had to attend these curricular updates so that they understood, here's what was renewed, here's how to access it, here are the commitments for this school year for implementation, here's how we're going to be monitoring it, and here's how you provide feedback. So that is new this year, and we're incredibly proud of that. And the feedback has been overwhelming from the teachers that they feel more equipped as they're now going into the classroom to plan the learning experiences. So we want to continue that for next year.
Only because we're on the adding courses piece and we'll get the course of study guide. I also think about the subtracting courses piece. Because if we just keep adding, so where do we sometimes, end of life, I don't know if that's a term that we use for education, something
collapse, we use collapse.
that is no longer, meeting our needs from a personalized learning perspective, that we've gone deeper into something that we can,
So that's where
shed others.
That's where the program coordinators work in partnership with the house administrators, the program associates at the high school. And what we're finding is courses now can be collapsed into a more innovative course, and we no longer need that. We do try to put that in the course of study guide as a redlined deletion, so we'll continue to do that.
Anything else on this item? Any quarterly update? Thank you, thank all the coordinators for coming tonight, all the hard work, appreciate it, it's shown in the schools, so.
Thank
Great
you.
All right, so next up will be the budget priorities. So, Mr. Bell, I know we saw this document recently. Maybe you want to talk to us about what's changed, if nothing, since then? Oh, and then Mr. May wants to kick off.
So, yes, we did present this document just last Thursday, wasn't it? And,
Just to
I know, why how time flies when you're not at the
and again, I just want to reiterate that this document is circulated to you all to get your feedback. It wasn't, this is what we were going to do, it's what we want to get board feedback, because we're going to be in a tight budget here, and we want to stay within the parameters of the budget. So we want to know, we want to understand what you guys are thinking about these items as well as what our cabinet and our building and district administrators think of. So that's what the purpose of is to review this document one more time. Thank you.
So my understanding is that the principals don't have to submit their request until the end of the month. So I'm wondering why we're looking at this before we've heard from them. And we also, I think last time, it's probably too soon, since but also looking for efficiencies in the budget to offset some of this, because a lot of this, and also I don't see my beloved social workers any realistic. And I think if we're really truly concerned about the social emotional welfare of all our students, we can't ignore the needs of our elementary students. They deserve social workers. I know years and years ago, principals were asked if they wanted a half-time psychologist or a half-time social worker, and they chose a psychologist. I'm not talking a trade-off. I'm not talking giving up psychologist time. I'm asking for social workers. There are kids in all our buildings, in elementary school, in the middle school, and high school, who suffer from traumatic things in their lives. A parent loses a job, parental abuse, drug abuse, divorce, death in the family. All those things happen, and someone needs to attend to them. And elementary schools had the least amount of personnel to do that. The middle schools have guidance counselors, social workers, psychologists, 2 assistant principals. In addition, the high school's we are sorely underserving our elementary students.
No.
I just asked for one.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Barbara, I just wanted to understand a little more what you're suggesting. So, is the suggestion that we, and I don't know enough about this, and I know this is, fortunately, it's been on the board for social services, so you have this kind of expertise in house. But is the is the idea that we would go get a social worker in all 15 schools, or what's the idea?
So middle school and high school have social workers, psychologists, and all that. I'm focused on the elementaries. I know we can't all of a sudden give every elementary school a social worker, but I think we should be able to come up with 3 social workers at least as a beginning, and there should be a plan then to add as we go forward. It should be part of our staffing plan, just like, well, we should have a staffing plan, and this definitely should be part of it.
Okay, and is the suggestion that this is an add to the budget, or there should be, or Ralph should be doing some swapping? What's the idea here?
Well, I think that we should be looking for efficiencies, because efficiencies can be found, because obviously we found a coordinator. We found a coordinator for PE and health between being creative, and I think not all of it has to be an add-on, but I certainly think I'd add on those before I'd add on almost anything else on this list.
Thank you.
If I like the bottoms-up approach, but if we could start with the top-down approach for a second. because I think, and I think Peter, you brought up the last meeting, I mean, we have to see what are we gonna get passed ultimately, right? And I think about last year, our budget grew 2.56%, right? I think that was the number. And that was with, I can't remember what the teacher contract increase was, but I know that we found some offsets. And Bob, I think you quoted the other night that 3.6% increase this year for the teachers.
teacher's contract.
Right. So that represents 85
1,400. So then 1,400 is 91% of our budget.
of our budget. So
You can do the math pretty quickly.
I'm kind of thinking like we're not gonna be able to do anything if we don't, we might be wasting our time here, if we don't have a lot of offsets here. And I mean, all these are wonderful ideas, but I just don't want to waste our time. So do you have other things up your sleeve before we go through this?
He's got a very nice suit on, but I don't know if he's got special sleeves.
Not $1 million worth of sleeves anyway. We have had some discussions before you all came here tonight, and we're going to continue those discussions as we move forward. So yeah, we have some ideas.
Good.
Thanks for getting that, Ms. Tate.
So to echo Barbara's point, I think, the elementary school students are experiencing trauma in a way that they may not have before. So if there was a way to add that type of service, and I know last Thursday night I pushed on the wellness center a little bit, because I wasn't sure if it was a physical space because there's staff added to it. I think there's probably ways, and I think maybe, Mary, you had mentioned it, because there's all the different support services, and I know that we do get the monitoring report, but how do they, like, is there efficiencies there? Is there any overlap? So I'm not against adding more emotional and social support, but I would just be curious to see if there was a more efficient way, or just out of the box thinking way to meet some of the needs K through 12.
Ms. Tate?
I am not in favor of increasing staffing to 3 social workers unless you're talking about taking a psychologist and deciding that building is better served by a social worker. Then I understand. I think the wellness center has 2 staff that are being added. Are those, I assume, psychologists?
Psychologist and a teacher.
1 psychologist and 1 teacher. And the wellness center, I'm trying to find the grades. What grades?
9 through 12, high school.
9 through 12. All right, it doesn't seem that we can accomplish both objectives at the high school level and the elementary level if we don't make some trade-offs. That's $100,000 for the high school.
But how is a teacher and a psychologist only $100K? I don't get that.
This is an estimate of
It seems a little better, some of us. We've seen the teacher contract.
getting young.
Not that young. I'm with Mr. O'Neill. I know we've talked about the social workers for several years, and maybe getting there is not a one-for-one school, but we've got to start somewhere. And honestly, it's not a trade-off. I don't think we're looking to replace psychologists in any size, shape, or form. They also have a purpose. My dad's a psychologist, so I feel kind of neat. But I do think that we need to look for a model that's going to work, whether it's a couple in the first year and figuring out how to roll it out further. But I think we really need to start moving on that. Dr. Francis.
I think it sounds like a great idea, but I also feel like I'm not really qualified to make that decision. So I think that we have proposed that, and I think if our administrators don't feel that that's a high enough priority, or that there are needs that aren't being met, that there are other places that are more important, I do feel like I want to allow that to be considered and not have the board make a decision without our professionals helping us with that.
Mr. Sher.
I have a question and then I have some input, feedback. The social workers that are proposed are working with who? Well, but let me just ask a question. Can social workers work with a child, under law, can a social worker work with a child without the engagement of a parent? Okay, so,
Work with a child without the family. In school, the answer is yes.
so they can go to
The
the.
family
the
doesn't
list-
need to be there, but you make sure they have permission from the family.
So that they get consent first, right?
If it was a one-time deal, if you're doing counseling, you'd want that.
I guess I'm trying to separate in the world of this. I mean, this thing lives in the soup of, we have a $40+ million we spend on special ed, psychologists, we have this big nurses, we have this big soup of staff that they provide a lot of support services to our kids and to our families, right? So, to your point, Barbara, I mean, right now, a 3 would probably be an ad, because I think, right, and wellness is an ad, and the thing I'm struggling with is, you know, I don't know how I feel about having social services in schools, right? There is a town department that is responsible for doing this, and a little bit, I find it a little bit.
There's an income element to the town's application.
And the town also doesn't see the students in the school during the school day. I
know they don't do that.
And they
It's
don't
on the
service,
social-
you have to be low income to get serviced by the town social workers. And it's more like helping fill out, applications for food stamps or SNAP, whatever it's called these
So
days.
if we had a conversation with those people about maybe changing what they're doing so they can give us the kind of support we need?
I think they would tell you they'd love to have 3 more social workers as well. There's a lot of need in the town. They do
There's need for everything everywhere,
Right,
right?
they do different things with families
Okay.
and kids. They're not interchangeable.
I didn't want to, I want to keep this on the budget plane rather than the merits of whether or not we should have these things. But I was just trying to understand what it is.
But you do know the town does pay for 3 social workers in the school. Our
Yeah.
three team talk counselors are paid for by the town.
Yeah.
And we have had conversations, Alan and I had conversations about looking at perhaps moving the model down. But that's funding that would come from the town versus from us. We're all coming from the same pot of money.
Right, but we wind up, well, anyway, whatever. So, the point I was going to make about the budget is my understanding from discussions with members of the BT, they obviously are going through their process, they're trying to figure out where they are. My understanding is right now, and it's a snapshot in time, there's some over there advocating that the town budget, operating budget should go at 4%. Okay? 4%. Okay? And by the way, if it goes up 4%, then presumably we could be able to go up 4%, and that would be hunky fat. Okay? There's some others over there who are saying, no way, Jose, I want to go up 2%, and I might be willing to go to 2.5%. Okay? So I don't know where that's going to land, and they're going to figure that out, and they're going to go duke that out, and they'll figure out where that is. I do know out of that conversation that the town itself, which compromises that 4%, right? They're talking, they need, I don't know, somewhere between 2.5% to maintain what they're doing. Okay? Which means that the other half of that budget is us. Right? Now, what I heard you say is to keep doing what we're doing now, we need at least well, we don't need 3.6, we need something less than 3.6. It would be really helpful if we knew what that number is. Do we know what that number is?
Sure. We, based on our discussions last year with the tiers and the need for these additional initiatives and trying to allow for some funding for this, we would be looking at a 3.5% increase. If we did nothing,
we need
absolutely nothing, we would need at least 3%.
So
3.
Is it we need 3 or we need more than 3? Just to keep
we
all the
need
headcount we've
we
got.
need 3, but that's,
To keep all the headcount, we need
Yeah.
3.
right. And that's high level, we haven't,
Could
dug
be,
down
right?
deep,
Could
we
be.
haven't scrubbed every budget.
Right. So, I think the question, you can figure out really quickly, if somebody prevails and goes against 4%, I don't know what the town's appetite is to raise their taxes 4%, then it's gonna solve our problem. If not, then most of this stuff, unless it comes out of efficiency, probably isn't on the table. So, if you want, so I put that out there because my understanding is that's what they're talking about over there, but who the heck knows how that's gonna turn out? And is it helpful for you guys to prioritize this in anticipation of you could fit it? Is that what you're asking for? Got it, okay.
So I just want to ask, Ms. Raven, I think, maybe ask the budget committee whether they'd be able to try to work with DET, and I don't know if they had a chance to. Ms. Raven. Ms. Tate.
Unless we switch names.
I'm just looking at it.
Are you suggesting tonight we go through the list in a systematic way? We get a sense of the people in the room, whether or not we would like Lori to build into the budget these budget items? Or are you just looking at this as a nice overview for us to ponder, take to the budget committee comes back to the board? What's the process?
Well, I think it's up to Ms. O'Donnell. I think what I've just heard in the exchange is they'd like us to prioritize, or at least give a sense of priorities, so that if it came down to, we have some money, but not all the money, what would we be interested in doing? Dr. Francis?
I feel like there were some questions that we had asked last week, and I don't think there's been time to get all the answers to those, but I would like some of those answers before I'm asking for the ranking. I mean, I'm trying to remember that something as simple as, the custodian and lead, we're like, well, what is the standard across the district? I think for us to make that kind of a prioritization without a little more information is difficult. So I think some answers to some of those questions would be very helpful to me before I would prioritize.
Do you want to just try to dispose of what we can and then parking lot what we can?
Ms. O'Donnell?
I agree with Dr. Francis. We don't have enough information. We asked questions last week about, if you add this person, what kind of productivity, what's the impact going to be? I mean, some of these are nice things, but we don't have enough information, and also we haven't heard from the principals. So if we've gone to the trouble of asking the principals to present their wishes for the budget, then I think we owe them an honest hearing.
Ms. Olson?
Right. I tend to agree with what Dr. Francis said as well, which is, if we go back to the whole social workers, there's definitely a need, but I think we need to look at where we can, she said, I think, I'm agreeing with something you didn't say, I'm sorry. What I think is that there is a need for more social workers, so I'm agreeing with Ms. O'Neill said. At the same time, though, I don't always feel like it's our responsibility to sort of pick out exactly, it's an administrative decision, and I know that you're asking, I understand you're asking for guidance, and no, I get that, but I would appreciate a little more time and questions answered too, before I get there. And we need to see where we can have these efficiencies before, it's a wish list, right? And now I'm putting out the bill there, but it's a wish list.
Mr. Sheriff?
Ralph will give you my 1, 2, 3. I'll give you my 1, 2, 3. And I do need more information to consider the other items, but we will get that by the time we'll run off the budget. I absolutely think we need to invest in looking at special ed. Okay, I don't know whether that costs 500 or we had that debate last time. As a priority, I think that needs to get funded to do that. That's just me. The second thing that's on my list is I think we run communications kind of lean. I don't know whether we need 2 bodies, I don't know if we need the right bodies, what have you. I'd love to see some more, if I could throw something in, I'd love to see some more support to communications, because I think we have an opportunity there. And my third one would be, anything relating to security. Okay, I mean, those are top priorities for now. Security. Now, I don't know if it's a head count or not a head count, but if, you know, categorically, if you said to me, should I go work on special ed? Yeah. Should I go work on improving communications? Yeah. Should I go work on security? Yeah. On top of that, these other things, I couldn't comment on them directly. You know, what I'd like to see, which I think there's an opportunity here, is to achieve some of these goals, like looking inside and reorganizing, right? So I know how many people we have, and Mary cringes every time I say this, it's no offense, Mary. But, you know, she's got a big budget, she's got a lot of people. So the thing that always begs me is, you know, when you go to a person who has 3 people and you say, go find efficiencies, it's like, what? When you go to a person who's sitting on top of $40 million and a lot of people, you know, is it hard to reorganize? Is it hard to think about reorganizing? Yeah, it's hard. But it seems to me there's probably some things in there. Give you the wellness center. I made the stupid mistake, and I'll end it on this. I actually asked a kid, if you have anxiety or you're feeling depressed, where do you go in the high school? You know what answer I got? There's more, I know where to go. I can go to my house, I can go to the psychologist in my house, I can go see my guidance counselor, I can go to apparently there's some special part of the nurse's office at the high school for when people are feeling, you know, there's a lot of places. What it tells me is that there's no doubt we want to work on wellness, anxiety, depression, but it seems to me we've got a bunch of different people trying to get at that. And it seems to me there's maybe an opportunity for some efficiencies there. So I kind of separate the world into what do you have to ask for because you can't do it, and what of these things could be done to Ms. Olson's point, my colleague Ms. Olson's point. The reorg and reallocating, that's your decision. That's not our decision, right? You've got the head count. If you want to go redo it so it works better, you know, go forth, my son or daughter, and prosper.
Mr.
I think it's funny. Do you think you're creating anxiety asking that kid that question? You didn't know where to go?
What? Probably.
Sorry, I had to say that. But a quick question, stepping back, I think you raised some really good questions on special education, and I have to admit I'm not well versed in this world, except for the fact that I do come from a family of special educators. So there are teachers in New Jersey, but I have to say they have the same exact issues I've heard here. They have now I think New Jersey does a better job of funding it, frankly, than Connecticut. I know New York does a much better job at a state level of funding it than our state does, but that's a separate issue. But it was, you know, I know that I've talked to them, it's 5 times the cost of the average student to educate typically a special education student. So I guess I looked at the numbers closely last year because you know I'm a numbers person, and I was scared too when I thought we were going to miss the budget, and I appreciate Ms. O'Donnell for making sure that we didn't. But then you showed how we're doing versus other districts, and I have to say we were pretty much doing as well. So I guess I asked you, Ralph, to your point, Peter, that you have 900, 1,400, I don't know what the number is of employees. And, you know, how would you like to use them more efficiently? Is special education program review for $500,000 or whatever it is the right course? I know we did 3 years ago, you told me we did a review that just looked at the compliance aspect of it. And now we're looking at the review more broadly. But why special ed? Just to throw it out there. Why not humanities? Why not STEM? Why not health? Like, why special ed? Why did this rise to the top? And that's what I'd like to know versus all the others. And then go for it.
Mr. Mayor, no, Mr. Mayor, I called on you now. That's how it works. It's my class.
Good news is there's no whiff here.
I think one of the things that we spend a great deal of time on, and money and staffing, is our special education services. And as someone that's trained in that field, I had a master's degree in special education, someone that had 3 out of my 4 children in the program, we need to look at that program and see if we can run it more efficiently. And that's one of the reasons why that's here on this list. Another couple of reasons are we have parents that are concerned about our services. And I think, personally, from my own experience, we do a great job. That's my own experience, but other people don't feel the same way. So, we talked about trust and gaining people's trust back. Well, we can do a comprehensive survey in special education. It might make everyone feel better about how we're delivering our services, because I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Ms. Olson?
I definitely respect what you're saying. It's a large price tag here or estimated amount to gain trust back. And I think a lot of it sometimes, I'm not saying I don't know, and I'm not saying it's run perfectly by any step of imagination, but and there's always room for improvement. That being said, a lot of it is legality. So, there's a lot of times students a lot of it's run by legal, as we know. So there's not always, I also hear what Ms. Ford says, we're not always able, or I've heard her say in the past, we're not always able to predict exactly where we're going to go in certain areas. That being said, yes, there needs to be some oversight. There's other areas, I think it's important to, the least restrictive environment. There's situations where, by law, people might have different ideas about whether students should be in a general ed classroom with an aide or not. A lot of that, no matter what we do, from what I've seen and understood, I don't think we have very little say in that as a school district. Not as a board member, as a school district. I believe a lot of it is the law, we have to follow the law. And that being said, I also agree, I've said this a couple times, but I think that we have to continue to, I always say meet the needs of all the students. You have a little friend that visited you. Okay. That being said, we need to continue to meet the needs of all students. Where I stand priority-wise, since we're talking about it, I also would wonder why special ed specifically. We heard concerns at the last, somebody voiced concerns at the last meeting in June about some issues with some questions about the ALP program. I'd be interested in auditing that, or seeing what we could do with perhaps seeing what we could do with the other, 80% of the students, or, I think it's important that we don't just look specifically, we need to look at I don't think it needs to be specifically special ed. I think this is a large amount of money, and so I guess what I'm saying, what I hear over and over again is there's sometimes some inconsistencies, there's sometimes double jump. There's a lot of issues heard from a lot of parents, and I'm curious. I know, and you could probably speak to this as well, and maybe we'll have a conversation more another time. But I know that Dr. Gilday had mentioned that has confirmed that sometimes starting at the younger grades, we do have different norms at different schools, meaning that she said that often a student might start in an advanced program, would get into an advanced ALP in Riverside, not in Riverside, but yes, in New Lebanon. Those are the two schools she used. So there are some, I'm curious to understand more about that. And it's true, this is a conversation I had. And I want to understand, I need to understand.
It's not because it's old conversations we've had.
Right, well, I had them again and again and again, and this one I had to talk to Gilday, but she had said that the route would be to, the route that we would take in that case, would be to audit that program and to kind of understand and make sure that we're meeting the needs of all the students so that we don't have the double jumpers who are then missed because they're in a school where they didn't get in, where they would have gone to another school, and she confirmed all that for me. So that's a program I'm interested in understanding, who were missing. I've heard over and over again students that are of parents who have children who are in the special education program that weren't getting picked up soon enough, missed several years of instruction of getting their services or students that aren't getting picked up and challenged, and both. And oftentimes it's the same. So special education, is it that different? It's not a part necessarily from the ALP program. It's not. So I'm trying to see why one particular group we need to do something, and I'd be more interested to see what would be the total cost of all of these different things before we jump into something like special ed.
Ms. Dayton?
Since we're going around the room and getting, I guess you could call it taking the temperature of the board on these items, I'd like to weigh in. The only item on the list that I would support is the special education review for 2 reasons. One of them is we do need a reorg. The Wellness Center can be a part of that. I would hope it would be. It's a wonderful idea, Mary. I really want to see that come to fruition. The 2 reasons why the only item I'd support is the $500,000 is because if you look at all the districts across the state, the #1 budget driver is special education. There's a lot of momentum in the state right now to fix the funding problem. There's a lot of really out-of-the-box ideas that are coming forward on special education. The #2 reason is the performance of the students. When you look at the data, there's always room for improvement in the special education category, and I think if we invest in this area, special education, and we really look at special education within personalized learning, we can complete the circle of transforming the district.
Mrs. O'Neill and Dr.
I defer to Dr. Fritz.
This brings back, well, something we had talked about a fair amount last year, which was the concept of an overall program review. So looking at ECRIS, looking at growth, looking at, not only whether it's ALP or SPED or humanities or, looking at class size, looking at all kinds of different factors and how do those factors influence growth and which ones are helping and which ones don't seem to be. And this was sort of a big goal that was coming down the pike and that was supposed to really be helping us to understand and reevaluate how we're spending our money, what we're investing in and what we're doing. So I think from that perspective, I completely agree with the concept of looking at an overall program review and looking at outcomes related to that and, both trimming things that aren't working and supporting things that are and whatever we do with that. And I think that that's a big overall goal that I would encourage, maybe less than right now, spending a lot of money on just one program. I think looking at the overall district and what we're doing in terms of a program review.
Mrs. O'Neill.
I think, if we're talking about building trust, I think maybe the first step with special ed is to tell everybody what we do right. I think we've let the public take hold of the message as usual. I think we need to put out what it is we do and do it. If we have to hire someone to do something that makes our message really, really clear and professional looking, I think that would help because I don't think people really understand. I've talked to BET people. They have no understanding of what it is we do and what it is we have to pay for, even for private schools. So we've lost the message. I think we need to get the message out, and I think that would be the first step. And then the second step is to really then go to the public, go to the teachers and go to the who are all involved in special ed, and administrators and parents, and find out what it is their concerns are. And then based on that information, then we could do an assessment of the program in relation to what the community needs, what the legal needs are, and what we see as the future in special ed. But I don't see spending $500,000 now until we know what we want to do. And I think that's going to take a good part of this year or more, and we should fund that. That maybe that's the funding that we need, is a small amount of money to find out how we're going to do this review.
So Barbara, I think things are great, and there's some work to be done now, but this is basically for 1920, and then the results of that are going to be months after. So this is, I think, a progression. I think what we're talking about doing now, communicating more, that makes sense. We need to build now, and I think we're looking around, build what it is that we want to look at, what is the result that we're looking for, so that they're actionable, because you're looking at 18-19 now, this is for 19-20, that would be the study, and then you're looking a year beyond that for anything you need to do. Let's go.
Out of curiosity, since all seem to know a lot about this program, have we formed, like we did for School Start Time, have we formed a committee of people to analyze this? Have we talked to the PTAC special ed? I know they have a special ed coordinators. Have we done all of that and exhausted all our resources before we sort of go off and spend, can you answer the question? Before we go off and spend $500,000?
Some were to get married.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. We can certainly do some, I mean, the special ed report doesn't come up until the spring. So if there are some things that you would like me to do in terms of surveying parents, surveying staff, we can do that internally without any additional resources, and bring that information to you as part of the report that you'll get in the spring of 2019. That would then impact your budget development for 2021 if you wanted to do a study after that. But there are certainly things we can do internally without external partners coming in that might answer some of your questions going forward.
Ms. Raven?
I think we have to do some sort of review. I think we know what the concerns are. We get the emails, and it's along with Megan said, it's the identification, and I agree, like identification in many areas. So Gaetan, what you had mentioned, like Lori and Ralph, we talked about it when we had our brief, you know, what should the budget committee be looking at? You know, we're looking at that sort of programmatic dashboard. What is each program? How many kids does it serve? What's it costing us? What are the impacts? So we can start to understand, you know, one thing versus another and make some of these decisions. But I do believe that we should invest some money in starting to look at and address the concerns, because I've only been on the board for 3 years, but I've heard the concerns. I don't think we need to do a survey. It's about somebody thinking that their needs of their child isn't being met. And I also agree with the communications piece. I think we do a ton of great things, and there's a way of packaging information, so I support the additional investment that we can make in communications.
Mr. Sheridan?
I'm okay if people want to revisit this. I tend to try to think about how we can be efficient as a board. And just for me, I think sometimes we lose the plot here. The way the genesis of this thing was the PTAC, who we try to listen to, they have a committee, they have a series of concerns. If you as a board member have not talked to the PTAC leaders, you should do that. Okay, so they're the community, and I think they would tell you in many areas we do things really well. In other areas, they really have a number of concerns, and they've shared those, I think, with board members individually and as a group, and they would like us to do something about that, right? They shared those with Jill Gilday. I know because I talked to Jill Gilday about or at least she talked to me about this subject, and she said the same thing. She said, yeah, eventually what we should probably do is do a program review, okay? It wasn't do it right now, it was do it at some time in the future, right? And then the other one, guys, if we're not remembering, is special ed just blew through its budget, right? So to Ms. Dayton's point, it's a budget buster, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's going on. Now, some of that's in our control, some of that's in our control, some of it's not in our control, right? I mean, that point's been made extensively. I think the genesis of this was, okay, do we want to do a review sometime in the future programmatically? I thought Dr. Gilday was saying, don't do it right now, but I'll do it next year or whatever. And I would expect any review would cover all of these questions, which is, how well are we actually doing? Where can we improve? What's the state of the art in special education? Are there some things that we could modify and change? Or could come out and say, by the way, you guys got the best one in the country, and it is, and don't change a thing. Who the heck knows? I thought that was the purpose of this, but maybe I've lost. And I thought this question was, you guys say, or Dr. Gilday had said, yeah, absolutely, we're gonna need outside people. We're gonna need outside people, A, because I can't go tie up all the staff who have to do delivery to do this, part A. Part B, it'll build confidence in whatever comes out because it's done by an independent third party. I view those two things as like super positive. Now, whether it costs $500,000 or can be done for $200,000, you know, the way you get at that is you say, here's the scope of work, right? And we're all speculating of what's included in that, but here's the scope of work. And you go out and you start talking to people and say, can you do this for this number, right? So I'm not too hung up on it's 500 or it's 200 or it's 100 or I don't know what it'll be. It'll be comprehensive reviews like this, but after people cost money, so it'll be something. But I thought that's what we were doing. If we as a group decide, oh no, we changed our minds and that's not really what we want to do, that's okay. We should figure out how to talk about that. Maybe it's a separate conversation than in this budget conversation.
Ms. Tate, on this, and then Dr. Francis.
I'll yield my time.
I was gonna,
Yeah, Dr. Francis.
I was gonna say two things. One is, I don't feel like we came to a conclusion, so I don't think we're changing our minds. I feel like what I had agreed to is that this is something that would be important for us to discuss and think about. So I don't think we had actually come to a conclusion on it. I think one of the things that is critical is I think there is an expectation from the community, and I could be wrong, but that it's not just an identification issue, it's not just a question of compliance, is that they really want us to look at potentially changing how we teach. Do we potentially group differently? You know, how much is least restrictive environment? How much are we sending kids to other schools? And doing other types of things. And I think I think we want to be really clear that if we're going to do a review, that it's going to answer the questions that are important to whoever we want, and that it's very clear ahead of time what those questions are going to be. So I'm just hesitant because I don't feel like that's a consensus that we've come to, and I hesitate to support something when I don't really know what it is. And I feel like everybody's got a little bit of a different view of that, and so I think it is important for us to make sure we understand that. You know, whether we commit to the money in the budget first and then develop that, or whether we feel like that's something we really need to understand ahead of time before we make the decision, I think is a good decision to make.
I mean, this is such a hard one. I mean, it really is. I mean, I wish we could do it all, honestly. And then, you know, I'm not going to be able to opine. That's why you have to bring someone outside or an administrator on what is the right environment for special ed students. Like I said, all I know is that I've had my aunt taught them in a sort of a restricted environment, and my cousin who's younger has taught them in the classroom. And you know, that's because that was the theory that at one period, and now I know it's changed. So that's not for me to opine on. I also suspect parents have different views on that. But also, if we're just going out there and philosophizing, I mean, you know, you have parents that send emails and frustrated. Sometimes we get good emails too. But you know, I also have parents that have come up to me whose kid is consistently an 80% star taker, for example. And some of them are really happy with that, and some of them feel like they should be differentiated. So, you know, but that's a large part of our population too, that I hope we're serving well. And, you know, how do we analyze that? So if we're just going to have a big picture conversation, I would want to make sure that we're thinking about everything.
I'm just trying to think of the best path forward on this item, and I guess, Mr. Mayor, I'm looking at you, wondering whether you want to try to develop some scope, because maybe that will help the conversation, which is what are we trying to look at, what do we expect to get out of it?
I will gladly put that together and we'll look at it at, maybe not the 20th, because I think we're getting pretty full there, but the following board meeting, is that?
The following meeting will be beyond our deadline for the budget book to be drafted.
So why don't you guys include it, and take it out?
Wait, but last year, we got the wish list after the budget book was produced. I'm trying to understand why it's important to.
I think this was one of the learnings from last year, which is better process to do this up front, so that when they develop the book, everything fits in where it's supposed to fit. And Mr. O'Donnell can weigh in if I got it wrong. Yeah, Mr. Shaw.
Here's what I haven't heard in this conversation, which is why we could probably wrap this up. I haven't heard any consensus on, hey, take that off the table. what I've heard is, here's a wish list that we got, okay? Different people have given different priorities. But I haven't heard anybody say, take it off the table, get rid of it, right, yet. And there's nothing in here, somebody said, 4 people said, 5 people said, yeah, take that off, right? So you're probably operating in a world, as we go through the budget process, which is what the budget process is, you include it. And then in the budget process, we're gonna take stuff off. I think, back to the original point, unless I heard otherwise, maybe I missed that, guys, did I miss that? No. So you probably need to include it, unfortunately. But what I think what I hear board members saying is, could you give us a little more information so that when we get around to the point where we're gonna have to take stuff off the table, presumably we will, we have enough information so we can prioritize it, right? That was the only point I guess I was trying to make. Unless is there something here people are really good with taking off right now?
Well, then you want to do visual development on that?
Well, yeah, I do, because I don't think we need it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right.
The original balance, it's not something the state's asking.
We don't-
Right, and I would have to do that.
Ms. O'Neill?
I was gonna bring this up later, but I'm reading the written report, and this is from a letter dated June 29, 2018, from the Commissioner of Education, and in the letter, she addressed to Dr. Gilday. She said, I understand that the Greenwich Board of Ed is planning to audit its planned programs and initiatives to determine whether an amendment to the racial balance plan would be appropriate. So,
I saw that too.
and I'm wondering, is this audit, and do we need money to do this audit?
Who suggested that to the, who suggested that to that person?
No, that's the Commissioner of Education.
I know, but who
I'm sure we had
suggested,
a job in there somewhere.
who suggested to the Commissioner of Education?
You never know.
But it behooves us, I think, to find out if there's anything that's going to be expected of us. I don't think it's gonna cost us, you know, $260,000.
I'll be happy to make I'll be happy to have a conversation with the state on that. And my other thought is, for the academic programs, we know what those academic programs are. So when we have the academic update and when we have the academic updates, we can look at what those programs are and if they are giving us that information.
Just talking about an audit, so if that's what we promised, we have to see if that's what we're doing.
Does that thing say we're supposed to do it?
Yeah, it doesn't have a date in it.
It just says we're aware you're thinking about this? What does it say?
It says, I understand that the Greenwich Board of Ed is planning to audit blah, 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 initiatives to determine whether an amendment to the racial balance plan would be appropriate. So
Does
we're
she then
supposed to
say
do
we're
an
looking forward
audit
to see that, or?
to determine whether we should amend our racial balance plan.
Of course, one of the pillars of our plan is having the Lebanon School open, so that's a bit premature. So maybe Dr. Carabello, if you wouldn't mind having that conversation and saying it's premature, but we're happy to be moving in February.
So what the other sentence in here is that we will continue to monitor the impact of this change of theme at Hamilton Avenue and enrollment statistics at both schools for the upcoming year. So,
I think one of the issues with that too is, if I remember, one of our problems is we had a fair amount of our new LEV students had gone over to MAth. And so again, to evaluate the theme on its own without understanding the other impacts, I think isn't going to give you a very good view of what's going on. I think you need to have those kids go back to new LEV, have the kids go back to new LEV, have things settle, and then I think it's a reasonable time to have that evaluation. And my understanding is that's kind of what we had said from the start, so.
but the theme, they're talking about it at Hamilton Avenue. So they've been there for a couple, well, you have to see how long they've been there. I mean, you can look at the subgroup, it's not that huge.
All right, Francis. No? Yes? No? All right, Ms. Katie.
I don't feel like we've had an adequate wrap-up of that document. I would really, I'm willing to honor Dr. Francis's request that we not say any more until we get our questions answered. But in the interest of time, because this is going to be another lengthy discussion when we get to it again, I would love to take things off the chart if we're ready to do so and there were no questions stated.
Ms. O'Neill.
Until those answers those questions are answered and there's some more information about some of the things that are requested, I think it would be unfair to the people who put them on here for us to take them off without them providing the information that's necessary.
I agree with you, but if there are enough questions.
I think it makes sense to do it
I think, yeah.
as its entirety. So Ms. O'Donnell, on the 20th, we'll have the information for the questions that were asked at the last meeting. Okay, I got the head nod. I've seen that before. Okay, so we will have this before us again on the 20th, and hopefully have some clarity. All right, with that, we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the FY20 capital priorities. Ms. O'Donnell, Mr. Mayo.
So this is a document you've seen before in the spring, and it's a document where we're prioritizing, sorry, they will warm in there? No. So it's a document that prioritizes our capital projects for the next few years. So, Lori?
Right, sorry. So right now, we're in the middle of our capital tours. We're visiting with each school, school's head principal, a principal and head custodian, trying to review with them. You know, we have the old 15-year capital plan, we have the list from KG&D, and then we have, you know, the infrastructure recommendations from the director of facilities, and you know, everything coming through school dude. So we're working through that process now to develop the capital plan. In terms of the academic programming or the space and programming requests, the way it's been prioritized here, my understanding and the direction that I'm getting is that, you know, we'll follow the recommendations laid out by KG&D back in June, and that will likely entail, and we've been talking about it internally, a feasibility phase for the first 3 schools that come up on the list. So it's Julian Curtis, OG, and Riverside. If I have that right.
High school.
So this one is separate because they're 3 elementary schools, and we need to determine whether there's any value in potentially packaging it or looking at them separate. So that was the first thing that you will likely see in the capital plan. And then separately, the high school was a top priority there, and so that would be just the schematic design or the beginning design stages of that project.
So Mr. Donnelly, you said the high school, is that rethinking the entryway and also the repurposing of the library and creating the classrooms?
I actually think it was just the security vestibule. At least that's what I heard, that was the highest priority.
Okay, I thought there was some discussion about whether we could package that with possibly doing the extension in the courtyard behind it at the same time for efficiencies.
It's possible.
Because I think there's if we look at the enrollment report from last year, I don't have it with me, but there's a bump coming to the high school for years where we need classrooms. So there may be a real need in
So those 2 pieces coming together will form our solid recommendation for FY19, and then of course also lay out the full 15-year master plan, again, based on all of those things. It's not just the KG&D plan. It's making sure we've talked to the principals and, you know, and we've not missed things like stage lighting in the theatrical program has come up many, many times. So we've heard it a number of times, you know, it's something we really want to be able to support. So things like that, you know, weren't in the KG&D list. So that's what we're working on. We're hoping to have a draft within the next couple of weeks. I know we'll be meeting with the budget committee to, you know, share that with them and get some guidance. And then I'm happy to take any other comments at this time.
Just a quick question. The fields, like Central Middle School feasibility study, and then I guess the Cardinal Stadium feasibility study. So when will we get the info back on that? And then when would those results go therefore into the next budget? If they were about, for example.
Right. so Cardinal Field specifically, we were delayed in getting our contracts off and going. So I'm trying to remember now, it's been some time. I think we're moving forward with the traffic study, if I'm not mistaken, but then of course there was some overlap with the regular traffic concerns around Hillside. Okay, so we had to sort of collaborate and figure out how we were going to move forward with that. So that delayed us a bit, as well as, and that delayed the contract piece. So we're not at a place where for this budget cycle where we'll have a better estimate, if you will. I mean, we have some estimate and we could probably lay it out in the 15-year plan, but it'll be an estimate.
2020 as.
We will need, yeah, we will, because we'll want to be continuing the design of it. If that helps, but it'll be order of magnitude. I mean, we're not going to be going out to bid right now or asking for those quotes per se on that work, because it's still to be determined, if you will.
Got it. And Central is the same.
Okay, so Central, right, so Central, we, over the summer, we had that transition from town, because they had started a feasibility study, and it transferred to us. So we're only just getting started with that project. That also significantly delayed, and I'm sure you guys recall my timeline that I put together back in February, so that's changed. Similarly there, as we do have the consultants on board, so we can talk to them a little bit more. Again, it's going to be order of magnitude, getting a sense for, if we go forward, how much is that going to cost? I knew we threw around this $5 million number last year. We'll try to get it to be a little bit more in line with what we're thinking, but the feasibility is looking at both grass and turf.
Right.
So, and those could be two different numbers.
Yeah.
So it's likely going to be that we're really planning for design monies, construction design, and
So we're
trying to get to the
2 years
bid.
out, basically.
Yeah, I think it'll be some time.
Okay.
So, Mr. O'Donnell, if I could just ask you, I guess the intro for HAMA, that's still on track, BET voted on it, it'll go to the RTM at some point sooner than later. So that does not need to be included in our outlay if that follows that timeline.
Okay, so, right, so we missed the deadline. There were some holidays that caused their deadline to be much sooner. We weren't ready with our consultants, because as you know, they're working through the design work right now. And that work is supposed to give us a better number, so that when we went to RTM, we could say, okay, this is the current cost. Hopefully it's lower, I don't know. But now we would have to present at the October, I want to say it's the 22nd meeting. So it shouldn't be in our capital plan. We may have to include it as a placeholder, because again, we're trying to draft for October 12th.
No, sorry,
That's my point, not included in our.
Yeah,
sorry, we voted on the BET.
Oh, okay, great. Perfect feedback.
You don't want to see that again.
Okay.
Just tell us it's done.
Exactly. You told them to CO there, now we're getting this done.
Important clarification question. When you talked about looking at the 3 elementary schools together or separately, I want to be careful in choosing my words. Are you looking at the benefits of doing a combined feasibility study with the 3 schools, or are you looking at the benefits of doing construction simultaneously with 3 schools?
The second, construction simultaneously, yeah. The feasibility study would just be, does it make sense for us to have one architect design all 3?
It doesn't make sense.
Is that what you said?
We don't know, so that, I don't know if the feasibility, if that's the right word, but basically start the process with an architect to say which makes better sense. Do we separate this out and make it 3 distinct projects, or is there value in trying to do these all at the same time? So if you recall, the KG&D timeline has them, they're not all happening at once, they're happening over time, right? But I heard from...
Clarification then, you're proposing that we refine the scope of the feasibility study. That is all. That's the question right now that we're working through with KG&D. So let's say they say there are economies of scale of doing 2 of them because they share similar features. Does that mean that we put a different number in the budget, or we're gonna pay one price for the feasibility study?
I'm not clear what
Okay. We would put, I would include in the 20 capital plan, one number, which we're pricing out right now, we're getting some feedback from KG&D, of what it would cost us to look at designing, and this is not the, well, I guess it is the design cost, designing one school over starting in 3 different years, or do we do it all as one this year, in like next year, like in 21, package all 3 as one design? Instead of saying in 21 do one design, in 22 start another design, in 23 start another design, does it make sense for us to do just one design? Does that make sense? Okay.
Anybody else on the capital? Dr. Francis.
Western Middle School?
Okay. Okay, so Western Middle School, we are, I think we were last getting ready to continue on with soil sampling. We're trying to get to a point where we can provide the regulators with information that can help them give us concurrence on the plan that we would like to move, a plan that we could move forward with. We were delayed with the contract, moving forward with the contract process over the summer, and I think now with school, starting up again, we'll need to touch base with them to see if we're able to move forward and how we do that. But that's where we are with soil remediation. We have money currently in the budget, and because there could be so many different options in terms of pricing to remediate the soil, I'm not sure if we'll be able to provide an update in this capital, in the FY20 capital plan. I mean, we could certainly try, but.
I don't know if this is related, but the issue we ran into with the bundling of the JC roof and the high school roof and the audit that we're doing, so when we're using that term bundling of projects, it doesn't mean we're gonna run into that issue. Like, they're not related, we're just using a term, not a process.
Right, we did not. Each of those for us was a separate project. In the town finance side, they bundled them together under one project.
I'm sorry, which project are we talking about?
By the way, if you go back and see the original document, you see where the disconnect was created.
Okay, I'm not trying to forensic anything, I'm just saying, like, whatever happened, when we're using these terms, be aware that we're not gonna create the same thing, regardless of how it was created.
The interesting part was, because I went back and looked at it, right, because I'm like, okay. Because I knew I saw a document that we approved with individual projects. What wound up happening is Jim Rickey, which he did a lot of this stuff when he was here, he broke our budget book. What he did is, he did his own thing where he said, I'm going to create these categories. One is roofs, one's into, he put them into buckets. And the challenge with it is people thought, oh, they approved buckets. They didn't approve buckets. The BET approved projects. Okay, the project list. So it was left with this impression that there wasn't a project list behind this, and it was kind of like a slush fund, and they could go move it all around. Not right. So the important part is, for our budget committee is, whenever we get the budget book, which I think we're going to get, we can't have this thing where we've slid with Jim Rickey into bucketing, and all of a sudden the detail behind it disappears. But I think, Lori, you understand that, so we're going to wind up seeing the detail like we've always seen the detail. I'm glad you brought it up, because I realized it was like a little bit of folklore that get created over this episode over the summer. And it's interesting if you go back and look at the thing. Yeah, New Lebanon, not Lebanon, JC was in a bucket, But the JC project is there quite specifically with a specific number, and we need to be sure that we maintain that going forward so we don't lose visibility. Can I ask one, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mr. Knapp.
Just to be clear, the audit that the DEP has conducted is completed, and we're waiting for the results. At the same time, we have our own ideas on how to move forward on capital projects. And Lori and I are developing a document to present as well. And one of the things that we talked about was not bundling projects. So we can stay out of this kind of a mess that we've gotten ourselves into. But sometimes when you do, like, we'll be very specific here. We talked about Central Middle School and their gym. Well, we did gym floor, not realizing that when we took out the bleachers, that the bleachers were going to fall apart. Literally, in our hands as we took them out. So, when we develop a project, it's not going to just be for a floor. It's going to be for the entire project, the gym, the pads.
Yeah.
So I just want you to understand what we're thinking about going forward.
That's great. That's great.
The other thing I wanted to, we get a lot of letters and stuff about Central's field and what we're doing there. And as Lori pointed out, we're still, doing a feasibility study. So, Board of Education, us, we are not interested in turfing all 3 middle school fields. We are interested in upgrading those fields. How they're going to be upgraded, whether it's going to be turf or natural grass, is still up in the air. And I just want to make that clear.
Can I just go back to my, I want to go back to my question. This, Lori, typically we get, and maybe I lost the plot, I'm sorry, because I was out of the room. The 29 million here, or?
Like my knife.
Yes, thank you. It's,
19.7 plus that.
so this is suggesting that the ask this year is going to be 19.7, right? And this list of projects flowed out of the master plan work that was done, right?
Yeah.
Is there going to be anything on top of this that you're anticipating in the capital request?
This is going to change because there's so many things that go into this. There's projects that are still ongoing that we have to consider that were not factored in to this KG&D plan here. You have these new asks. We have to balance whether we can handle doing everything. You obviously can't have too many projects going on in one place. So I don't know how else to explain it other than to say we literally have to look at every single project and pick them out and put them together on a capital plan, on this 15-year plan. So are we going to hit the 20.9? I don't know. I don't know if we should hit that number. I don't know that we can handle doing all that when we have all this backlog to do as well, but that's what we're thinking about.
Okay, so my question against this 20.9, when are we going to see the ideal list that goes behind that? Are we going to see that when you present the budget, or?
At the budget committee.
So not beforehand, okay, fine. And the last one is does this include, other than the field at Central, right? Does it include anything else at Central? In the 20 in this list as it is right now?
Maybe the annual expenses?
No, but is there like a feasibility study for the building? Is there something?
No.
No, okay, so that's all, that's years out, okay. So,
You might not be on board when the county is.
He might.
No.
He missed this.
Absolutely not.
He may still be here.
Absolutely
Yeah,
not.
you've said that before.
Okay. But, okay. Anyway, fine, that answered, I'm good, okay.
All right, anybody else on capital? All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we moved racial balance and update to discussion items, and Mr. Neal on an updated report, right? anything else you want to say about racial balance? No? Anybody have any other questions about racial balance? Hearing none, we're going to move on. No, Barbara had asked about whether we do actually owe the state something, and we're going to get to the next one. All right, so the final discussion item of the night is annual Board of Education goals. So when we moved to this retreat format last year, there was some discussion about what we would do. I went back, I actually couldn't find any written board goals. We've set goals for the district before in terms of performance goals and such, but we've never actually set board goals. So the toll gate question here is whether or not we think we ought to set some board goals for ourselves. Now, these would be high level, not academic achieving math at a certain percentage. Dr. Francis.
I would say, just to add to that, I think it's how do we define board goals and how quickly do we want to stick to that versus something that crosses over into district goals. So I think,
That's a great question.
I mean, I just think it would be useful for us maybe to have that general conversation first and what kinds of things we include, and then we can get to the specifics.
I mean, generally, in my mind, our district goals are set up in a strategic plan. Right? That's our district goal. If there's something more specific than that, I mean, there were once upon a time other goals. Certain kids are going to be reading by X level, X number of students are going to be in algebra by 8th grade, right? That's the goals of the past. We've kind of moved away from that into the more strategic plan. So when I went looking on Google, which is the place we look for such things, you would see the board set goals for itself, things a board would do. So, I sent some links to just a couple I have found, continue to raise student achievement. In my mind, we would put that under a strategic plan, right? Continue to drive the strategic plan, including, and we would put that as a subset. So those are the high level goals I'm thinking just we as a board would aim for this year. Start with the state administrator.
So I have an interesting topic that addresses this question. In my mind, the following is a board goal. I've spoken to others on the board who think it's a district goal. But I think it's something that none of the prior boards in their previous incarnations have done well. And that is to communicate to the community our expectations and our accomplishments based on the dashboard or whatever this board would like to use as our measure of progress. That means beyond the wonderful work that Kim Eves does, I think we as elected officials have a responsibility to speak with one voice and to be communicating our results and not wait for the public to go to board docs and dig out documents that look at percentages. So I'd like some feedback on whether you think that is a board goal or is that a district goal?
I guess in my mind, it's something of both, right? When you go and you look at our self-evaluation, which was the other document I pointed people to, that was actually one of those areas where I think we can be advocating more, whether it's our expectations and accomplishments or advocating for our budget. Those are areas where I saw there. Ms. Raven.
I took it as stuff that we goals for ourselves, so not district goals. So we talked about we want to do the Lighthouse or whatever it's called project. We go to the CAPE conferences. Like there's stuff that we do and it's not folded into this just in general being a better board of board members, a board of education like the 8 of us. Things like visiting every single school, like, are we getting into the schools? I totally look at it as the stuff that the 8 of us do individually, our participation in our committees, like, are we sharing the workload? I totally think of it as the 8 of us. And maybe I'm just one of 8.
Just to go back what was more generally speaking, this is something that was this something that we had on our calendar that we were going to revisit again with Lighthouse? Like another, to look at?
I don't think we would be doing goal setting with them. I think that's more generalized, training just us. So this is something you would do at the beginning of the year, take a look at the end of the year, that for our students.
Right.
We do that for our staff, we just have never done that for ourselves.
Then I took it to also to mean more, what is our role, how we're achieving, not so much, basically what Ms. Raven said, I think.
Mrs. O'Neill?
I was wondering why you thought that the Lighthouse wouldn't be a place where we would be setting goals. It seems to be the ideal place to have time, in-depth discussion, where we are, where we want to go. I think that's the perfect, and it wouldn't be a one-shot deal. There are sessions ongoing over time. I think it'd be a perfect place to set goals.
Dr. Francis?
I totally agree with that. I did start to develop some ideas about things, and I think professional development, when I look back at our survey or whatever the thing we did of ourselves, valuation, that's the term. And so I said for professional development, but I kind of wanted to be a little more specific with that, so I figured out some things which I'm not wedded to, but I think goals working as a unit or team to support the strategic plan. I think certainly working as a team, I think there's one thing that we do not seem to do that well in our self-evaluation. I think to work as a team to communicate clearly about the strategic plan and district goals, and to work effectively with the superintendent in achieving district goals. I think it's looking more at, I don't know, SMART goals, how do we evaluate that or measure that? I think that's really tricky with these, and I recognize that, but I think it's trying to use our Lighthouse, trying to use the professional development to really work on how do we as a team achieve things that I think are very important for us as a board, not specifically district goals, but sort of how do we support the strategic plan, how do we communicate about the strategic plan, how do we work with the superintendent in achieving those things, and I think it's really more about the team building, about what do we get out of Lighthouse for that. The second one that I think came up a little bit when we were talking about as an example about, that sort of we're trying to develop a budget, but we don't know what we have and chicken and egg. It's, do we as a board try to find ways to cooperatively work with other town government groups to improve our overall functioning? And that example was sort of the budget development. So are there ways that we can try to function better in interaction with the town to make our operations smoother?
Funny, I wrote down 4 things, and I think many of the things that you guys just said, so, but one of my top theme was communication, really, and all of us, and I think Kim does an amazing job, and I loved seeing that article this morning. But, and I've tried, everyone I saw today, I said, did you see that? So, I mean, it's even little things like that, all of us just individually doing that. The one other thing that I thought about, but I don't know, we all get so many emails. I mean, if we did like a weekly letter, or I don't know, like I really enjoy the weekly letter I get from each individual school, I must admit. But maybe if we started to add another one, I don't know. I don't know if it would just become something that someone deletes. Or if it came from the superintendent, if it would be, if people would read it a little bit. Something like, I don't know, just like a great summary with sort of, like Friday facts, whatever, isn't that what Mom calls it? Like, so things like that, just an idea. The other thing that I have worked with other governments in town, and I know some of us talk to the members of the BEC, but if we could collaborate on that a little bit more, that'd be helpful. And then, I think we've done this well now, but I sort of had written down a clear sense of priorities every year, because I know when we originally came in, there was that whole thing, Jill said that appreciate how many post-it notes. Anyway, I think we've done a good job, I believe, of sort of reducing that, but if we could just go into each year with maybe 3 things that we all agree on, then I think it would be nice if we had sort of a clear sense of priorities for the superintendent. Those are sort of my things.
That's awesome.
I also like the communication idea. My concern with a weekly letter would be, we would probably create maybe many more questions and then more work for some of our people that are already working a ton. So, but even just to get the good news out more often, and I know that Kim probably does a great job of it, but could probably use more support there. I think that just getting the good news out, and also even if it was more like a monthly or quarterly, something where we get to say this is what's been going on here. But you're saying from the board that I'm guessing.
Yeah,
but weekly I'd be afraid, because I'm afraid sometimes if we say one thing, gets followed up with a lot of questions.
There is a superintendent's monthly, I don't know if Rolf's done one yet, but maybe that's a way further. Congratulations, yeah, the last super learned late too, so don't worry.
Really?
Yeah. But Kim can send that out to the community, it's a good way to do some outreach. It gets posted, yes, you can speak to
So,
yeah.
so you probably memorized the communication plan we presented as a written report last May and June, or last June. But in that, we did announce to you that we are going to be issuing, so it's not necessarily a board goal, but we are going to be issuing a newsletter after each board meeting. So we're setting up that system now, and it's a system that we can load database information into for parents and staff, and to some degree for some community organizations, really elected officials, because we have that information, but that the community themselves can sign up to receive notifications from the system. So it's being operated through the website, and we'll be launching that. I don't think it's going to be after tonight's board meeting, but hopefully by the end of the month, and we'll start doing that after each main retreat and main monthly business meeting. So that will help with the engagement aspect of the board and just in getting out that information. Likewise, in terms of good news, it's a major focus of the communication plan and the goals, and we are going to have a district newsletter twice monthly that is largely dedicated to news and information, things like, the magnet application season now, and summer school application, but all the points in pride and all of that, and that this is trying to collect all of the notifications that we're sending out, the announcements in the news, good news that we're sending out in one place, so people know this is where it comes. It comes every other week on, I think we've chosen a Tuesday or Wednesday, and reduce the number of one-off communications that get lost, and let people be able to find it and focus, and then if they didn't have a chance to read it, they have an easy way to search and look for it, and then it also be archived on the website. So those are two things that I think are addressing your consistent communication comments, and just want to make sure that you have that on the radar.
On your twice a month sporting events, arts events, I know in the high school discounts have something that calendar of those.
We'll try. That's a lot of detail to manage, but we'll try and see how we
That'd
can
be
pull
great.
that
Even
in.
just, big stuff coming up. Mr. Chair.
Unsurprisingly, I think the goals are a little bit differently. Huge. I think tops down with this thing. I think first you have to think about the organization, right? Because board doesn't live independent of the organization. And what the board should do, I would hope it would focus on accomplishing things that support the organization. Well, then you have to ask the question, what is the organization trying to achieve? Because the subject was annual goals, right? We have a strategic context for annual goals for the organization, right? We're trying to do something over the span of the strategic plan. The real thing we need to set is what is the organization going to get accomplished against that strategic plan this year, right? So, and I don't know what that list is, but there should be a list of organizational goals. And candidly, the organizational goals become the goals for the board and the superintendent and everybody else who lives in the district. That's how goals work. You set them for the organization, and then everybody has to play their role to get those goals accomplished and whatever that means. In that context, you were talking about board goals, right? So the question becomes in that, what does the board need to do specifically tactically to support those organizational goals? Get a budget passed, whatever it is. But it should also have, as you pointed out, some capacity building so that it's better at helping achieve those goals. I think of capacity building in 3 areas. It's kind of how does the board work internally? How can the board be more effective itself? How does the board work with the other parts of government? Because we're a public entity and we live in the rest of government. And then how can the board work better with the community? So what I would think about is if you take those 3 broad themes I think we should have a goal or two in each one of those themes. So, as an example, how can we work better internally? I would have a goal. By the end of this next year, we have properly and more consistently implemented and leveraged our committees and our liaisons, okay? We're really inconsistent in how that works, right? So that's building capacity to a goal that supports the overall goals, right? You were talking about how we communicate with the community, right? I agree with somebody. It's amazing to me. We published a strategic plan. We never published benchmarks associated with it ever. And we just haven't communicated at a board level, which is where we live. You know, you're doing a lot every day, but the board's never said, this is our strategic plan, and this is how we're measuring our success, and this is what we're expecting for the community. I mean, we're in year 4, I think, of that plan. We've never published that. So to me, that would be a goal to get done. Again, maybe against the one of work with the community. I'd like to see a goal. We talked about another one. You know, maybe it connects to liaisons and what have you. I'd like to see us get much more leveraged and out in the community as a group. You know, everybody does it kind of independently. I mean, I'd like to see, we have liaisons, we have a liaison to PTAC. We don't have liaisons to committees in PTAC on subjects, right? So my point with it is I think you have to set organizational goals. The board needs to reflect what those goals are. We have tangible things we are going to accomplish to support those goals. And I think the second part is we need to establish some goals of what we're going to get accomplished this year that builds our capacity to support the organization. And that's, I guess, the way I think about board goals, to rattle them off in, you know, we can sit around and there's 8 smart people around this table, we can come up with some really great ideas. But if they don't have a construct and they don't scale up and down and fit, I guess I'm kind of wondering if they're the right things to be focusing on.
Right. In my mind, this was the start of a conversation, and it may be that Lighthouse is the right place. I think it's actually healthy for us to talk about this stuff. It honestly helps us get on the same page. So I think you're right, Peter. If we can align, and honestly, you know, we asked the staff to align to the strategic plan. We should be looking at it in the same way. So this is the start. I didn't expect to walk out here, by the way, with goals written, and I didn't expect anybody to say, I'm going to go write them, because I certainly wasn't volunteering and taking notes. But do keep this in mind. It is something we should talk about. It is something we should be doing as an organization, not just as a board.
I'd like to just propose, Peter, I think we need to, the problem that it happens with this, and I've seen this, is we always have these conversations, but we're really dealing with something time-bound. We're dealing with a year, right? So this conversation is about a year. And the thing we always do as a board is we always start these conversations, but we never bring them to conclusion. And our trouble is, if you bring them to conclusion in January, we're 40% through the year. So I'd like to suggest, you know, to maybe be a learning organization, we probably need to set a date certain, and I'm not looking for perfection here, let's just view this as first pass. Let's set a date certain where we're setting goals, and if they're not perfect, they're not perfect, but at least they're set. Because we could wrestle over this for months, let's not make good, how's it go? Perfection the enemy of the good.
So Dr. Francis raised her hand. I think she's a volunteer.
No, I was trying to remember. I think our first Lighthouse is not till like January.
It's not. It's late.
Right. And I don't know, December, and I don't know what that was intended to be. I mean, maybe what we need to do is just.
They've got it.
It's really its primary goal is to build board capacity.
Great, awesome. That's right along with what we need to do. So, you know, the question is, do we try and just get ourselves a few simple ones and realize this is our first pass, and you know, we're teaching students to risk take and try things and learn from mistakes? Do we try to do that early, or do we try to meet in December, make sort of goal setting part of that, and then try to come up with more perfect goals that maybe are not things that where our deadline is the end of June? But I think we should sort of review which way we want to approach it and then build our path to get here.
Ms. Dayton.
I think we should set the board goals that don't have to do with the district strategic plan content, but have to do with our board's functioning ASAP, and then use Lighthouse to set the district goals, which fit into a much larger context, which is achievement goals.
Ms. Olson?
I think Lighthouse is probably a good place to come up with goals, board goals. But I'm signing homework now, here's the teacher in me, but I think we do need to do a little homework beforehand and come with, and a limited number. No, and I actually really appreciate how Mr. Scher laid it out, and I personally it's my first year here, and I would love a list of, here's your exact role, because, it's tricky, there's a lot of things, I'd like to be more involved in the community, it's tricky being a school teacher, I'm busy during the school day, so visiting the schools or going to PTAC meetings, there's certain things that I'm just, what could I do, how could I serve in my capacity, outside of those particular hours and be a valuable member and carry my weight. So I'd like to have that kind of one of our goals. What does it mean to be a liaison and how can I do that? That would be really helpful. So I think we should come with something. I think Lighthouse is the right place to have that conversation with a professional, guiding us. But I think we need to come up with something. I don't know the number, but I think if we each came, 3 or something, we could maybe avoid. Okay, then 1. I don't know. You're right.
There's going to be common
Don't confuse
denominators.
goals with tasks. That's what happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
People want to load tasks, and those aren't goals.
So I'm hearing a few people say wait for Lighthouse, I'm hearing a few people say, let's move on this now. And look, nothing is set in stone, we can set these now and revisit them when we start with Lighthouse and say, God, you were completely wrong. All right.
Can you put this on the calendar for some time?
Yeah, we can put this on the calendar. I am willing to put myself out there. I will be the lousy scribe. I will probably put too many words you don't like. I'm going to admit that up front just so we can be clear on this. I will probably call a couple of you individually to get ideas. We don't want to be having meetings by email, and we want to do this in an open and transparent way, which is what we're doing on camera. But I think I want to get input as I do this because I don't want us to be looking at this all for the first time at a meeting and screaming and yelling and crying about it.
For transparency, I'll just send you what I had typed up, what I read out loud.
Right, and if anybody else has any ideas that they didn't speak out loud, I did take some notes, I do a videotape. Feel free to shoot me and I'll leave me an email, and I'll acknowledge that. And then we'll look to schedule some time, figure out when that is, in the not too distant future. Mr. Mayo, you may absolutely make a comment. Not about board goals, no, you guys will make a comment, we'll hold it in.
Just last comment tonight anyway. Well, I didn't mean to usurp your authority, I'm sorry. I just like the fact that we were all sitting around this table, having a dialogue and really discussing what matters most to us, which is our students and their academic and social emotional well-being. So thank you all for adjusting to this new format, and I hope we can continue this as we move forward during the school year. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. With that, Dr. Cressy, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I move that we adjourn.
All right, all those in favor of adjourning? We are adjourned, thank you.